Side of the table.
All right, I'm gonna call the committee of the whole for February the 7th to order. I would like to acknowledge that we are in the Mi'kmaq, the traditional or ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We have one regret, Sandy Garcia was not here tonight. Additions to the agenda, I have one addition to the agenda for in camera, labor relations and contract negotiation. Any other additions to the agenda?
Is that item 4 then?
It's under
Under
number 4.
Yes. Item 4, okay. And I had just a question. The tab to follow for item 2, is that tab B or?
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's tab B. Okay,
So approval of the agenda,
I'll move.
second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Approval of the committee of the whole minutes from January the 10th.
No, I didn't see anything.
Then I will approve that by unanimous. Consent.
Yeah.
Presentations, so we have a presentation and interpretation of our latest assessment in the town property valuation services by GVSC. I'll turn it over to you guys.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mayor Boyer, councilors, staff. Pleasure to be here again this year, and I know that some of you recognize me, but I'm a quick introductions. Paul Beasley, I'm the municipal account manager with Property Valuation Services, and I also have my colleague Rod Tremblay again here this year. And Rod's the Assistant Director of Operations and Assessment. So Rod's going to share the screen, and I'll get on quickly with the first part of the presentation, then I'll hand it over to Rod, and he'll give you some of the numbers for Annapolis this year. We'll go from there. So the first half of the presentation, you'll remember some of it from last year, but I'll go through it quickly. And that way it'll leave you a little more time for questions and for Rod to go through some of the numbers as well. So go ahead, Rod. We'll go to the next slide there. So similar to last year, we'll tell you a little bit about PVSC, a little bit of what we do as far as market value and mass appraisal. Rod will take you through the 2024 assessment roll, and we'll talk a little bit about the inquiry and appeal period, which is quickly coming to a close. Go ahead there, Rod. So just as a reminder, we're created under the Property Valuation Service Corporation Act. That was a little over 20 years ago when PVSC split from the province. We assess property as per the Nova Scotia Assessment Act. That's the provincial legislation. We're independent, we're not for profit, but we're funded by all 49 municipalities. We are governed by a board of directors. Joe Feeney, the deputy mayor of Mahone Bay, is still our director the last time, or still our chair the last time I checked. And we continue to have about 130 employees around the province working out of 50 different communities. So what we do and what we don't do, quickly again, a little refresher. We deliver the assessment roll to all 49 municipalities by December 31st each year. We're mandated under the Act to do it every year. This year, we delivered about 647,000 assessment notices just a few weeks ago. That compares to about 630, a little more than 630,000 last year. And we administer the capped assessment program and the seasonal tourist business designation program. What we don't do, which is essentially what council does and the province does, and there is a definite line between the two. We do not have the authority to set the tax rates. We don't have the authority to collect taxes. We don't have the authority or any legislation to create tax policy or provide tax relief. We've got quite a few questions when we make presentations the last couple of years about, well, what can you do for people that can't afford their homes? Well, we do the legislation as per the Assessment Act. Anything to do with tax relief and that would be under your authority or the province's authority and so on and so forth. What we do is set the assessed value of a property across the province, all the properties, and we do it in accordance with the Act. Right, Rod? Okay, so we assess at market value, as you'll recall, which is the amount in which, in the opinion of the assessor, the property would sell for on a prescribed date, the date prescribed by the director in the open market. And that we also, as far as the assessment goes, the assessment shows on the roll, it shall be the assessment that reflects the state of the property as it existed on the first day of December, immediately preceding the filing of the roll. So the date for the 2024 roll, which we're dealing with right now, as far as the market value date, was 1 year ago, which was January 1st, 2023. And the actual state of the property as if it existed or as it existed on December the 1st, 2023. So market value a year ago, state of the property right up until as close to the roll filing as we can in December. Hey, Rod? So we use mass appraisal standards and practices. Mass appraisal, the process of valuing a group of properties as of a given date, which was the January 1st, 2023, a year ago, using common data, common sales data in particular, also some common costing data, income data, those types of things, using standardized methods and statistical testing. So we are required to assess properties based on market evidence. So we look at sales in order to determine or to provide that market evidence. All right, Rod, we'll go to the next one. So the three approaches to value, I won't go into this too much. They are internationally accepted valuation methods. The sales comparison method is by far the most common and most widely used, in particular for residential properties. We use the income method for those properties that derive their value from an income stream or cash flow stream, such as retail strip malls, larger apartment buildings, office buildings that rent out and lease out their space. We also, for more unique properties, will typically use cost. Those are things such as the power plant, on the causeway, or industrial properties, or things such as that, fish plants around the South Shore and that type of thing. All right, Rod. So just a reminder of the key dates that went into the December or into the 2024 roll. The base date was the value on January 1st, 2023, and it's based on market sales and financial data. The state date is the characteristics and physical state of the properties on December 1st, 2023, just prior to the roll being filed. That culminates in the assessment roll, and the notices were sent out on January the 8th, just a few weeks ago, which began the appeal period, the 31-day appeal period, and the appeals must be received February 8th by midnight, which is Thursday evening. So just a quick note that if you know somebody that's wishing to appeal or thinks they might appeal, get their appeal in quickly. Do not put it in the mail because we have to receive it. So tell them to either fax it or take a picture, sign it, take a picture, and email it in because there's only 24 hours left essentially. So, all right, Rod. And I'm going to pass it over to Rod from here and let him talk a little bit about the CAP assessment program, provide you some of the numbers.
Certainly. Thank you, Paul. And good evening, your worship and counselors. As Paul mentioned, thanks a lot for having us to your meeting this evening and having the opportunity to talk a little bit about the assessment role. Again, I'm Rod Tremblay, Assistant Director of Operations with PBSC. So I'll just take a couple more moments of your time to tell you a little bit about the detail of the assessment role as it relates to Annapolis Royal. Starting with the CAPT assessment program, this is always a popular slide, and certainly we often get questions from councillors as Paul and I go around and complete some of these meetings with the municipalities at this time of year. So certainly happy to address those at the end of the presentation as well. So just briefly, PBSC administers the CAPT assessment program, known as the CAP, on behalf of the Nova Scotia government. So Section 45A of the Assessment Act. The program places a cap on the amount that the taxable assessment for eligible residential property can increase year over year to the consumer price index every November. So the cap rate for 2024 assessments is 3.2%. What that means is all properties that continue to be eligible for the cap this year that were also capped in 2023 last year, that cap has been increased by 3.2% for this year. Last year, that number was significantly larger. It was 7.7%. The reason for the difference is the difference in the CPI that's provided to us from the Nova Scotia Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing as calculated by Statistics Canada year over year in November. So 3.2% is that amount that all of the capped assessments have been increased for 2024. So we have a snapshot of a relatively straightforward situation or sort of a typical assessment notice here to explain a little bit more about how CAP works. So in this case, we'll assume this is a residential property, very likely a piece of land with a home on it, but we'd call it an improved property. The assessed value for 2024 is $442,500. So that's that second column on the notice. I'm sure many folks on the meeting here have held one of these in their hands recently, so and seen a very similar layout. So that assessed value, as Paul mentioned, represents our determination of your market value for the property, what we feel that your property would sell for based on the data that we have for that property as of January 1st, 2023, 1 year prior to the date the assessment notices are mailed out, and the physical state of the property as of December 1st, so roughly 2 months ago from now, so December 1st, 2023. The reason why those dates differ is two reasons. One, to allow us to review property sales transactions and make sure they represent the market, as Paul mentioned, and also to allow us to capture new construction so that there is that accessible tax bases available to municipalities. So if someone constructs something over the summer of 2023, they would be assessed for the degree to which that project was complete on December 1st of 2023. Getting back to my cap analogy, so the third column on the assessment notice here has a capped assessment of $347,500. Our system will automatically calculate which is the lower of the two numbers. In the vast majority of cases, the cap is the lower of the two numbers. So if the market increase year over year exceeds the CPI and nothing else has changed on the property, so in this case, we could presume that last year the assessment was lower than $442,500. The cap we know is 3.2% lower than 347. So the lower of the two numbers becomes your taxable assessment, and that's what is indicated in the last column on the right, and that bottom right corner is the number that the municipality is using to calculate taxes for that property and apply the mill rate as determined by council. So a brief snapshot of assessment roll activity within the town of Annapolis Royal. So we reviewed about 18,000 building permits last year in the province of Nova Scotia and completed over 12,000 property inspections related to those permits to determine physical changes to property. 14 of those permits were located within the town of Annapolis Royal. We had 42 property transactions that we reviewed to help us determine market movement year over year within the town of Annapolis Royal. So those would be transactions that we would review to determine whether they represent the market and use those within our mass appraisal system to predict where the values have moved year over year. We also received 20 assessment appeals in 2023 within the town of Annapolis Royal. I'm going to move on to the numbers. So looking at a comparison 2023 to 2024, in 2023, total residential in the town of Annapolis Royal, 67 million, just under 68 million overall, and 82 million for this year. So that represents a 22% lift year over year. When we calculate the cap, that lift is significantly smaller. So what that means is there's a certain number, 84% of properties that are residential properties and within Annapolis Royal are capped. So the number becomes tempered a little bit because those properties are moving up only by the CPI rather than by that market increase as it's been applied. So the difference year over year from just under 60 million to 66.9 million, just under 67 million for total residential with cap, that represents an 11% lift year over year. And again, that cap, the CPI applied is 3.2% for this year. There's 84% of residential property is capped in the town, and that's up a little bit from 80% last year. The reason for that is because of that market lift. The difference between the market lift and the CPI is a little bit greater on average this year because the CPI is significantly lower. So more properties come onto the cap. The cap benefits more properties in terms of that distance between the assessed value and the cap, as I discussed in the previous slide. Looking at commercial assessment, total commercial was up slightly from 50.1 million to 51.35 million. That represents a 2% increase overall. When we look at commercial taxable, so the smaller of the two numbers, there's a couple of significant commercial exempt properties within the town as well. Paul mentioned Nova Scotia Power. There's a 7.5% lift to your commercial taxable roll year over year. And I'll just move on to the next slide. So a little bit about sector highlights for properties that are a little bit different. So commercial properties, multifamily, properties that we might value on the cost approach or the income approach, as opposed to your sort of typical residential property, which, as Paul mentioned, would be valued using direct sales, so sales of similar properties. So with commercial property, despite rising costs of building materials and labor, there was a continuation of commercial development noted throughout the province. Our business and industrial parks continue to see significant market growth related to sort of a bit of a spring back from the COVID-19 pandemic. And apartments continue to be a strong investment. So everyone would be aware of the media tension surrounding our current housing shortage within the province of Nova Scotia and throughout Canada and likely North America right now. And due to that increased demand, property owners are seeing a strong investment in multifamily property and continue to purchase, remodel, and construct multifamily properties to satisfy that housing demand. Our retail sector was steady, so we saw a steady tendency and some increased leases in retail. So as the picture on the right indicates, sort of your small retail or what you call like a strip mall that may be valued based upon the income that it produces. We're seeing a relatively steady return expected on those. So a steady market, not a significant increase, but not a decrease either. Within the office sector, buildings have remained flat, reflecting the sector's response to shifts in the workplace. So where COVID-19, of course, changed the workplace significantly, and we're seeing still a little bit of recovery or sort of shift in demand and watching where that market will go for that class of property. Within the town of Annapolis Royal, I thought it was interesting as well. Your Academy condo development, quite a significant residential taxable when the value of all of those condos is added. So I believe 38 units in the Academy. All of those are assessed at $226,000 for this year. And that's a total of $8.6 million in residential taxable on the roll. So quite a significant portion of the overall roll represented there. And we did see some sales to indicate market trends within that building as well. So I'll touch briefly on natural disasters. I think quite fortunate to say that Annapolis Royal has not been as directly impacted as some of the surrounding municipalities as it relates to natural disasters of late, certainly, and hopefully that continues. So Paul and I were presenting to the municipality of Barrington last night that certainly saw a significant impact, as did the neighboring Shelburne County and HRM with the wildfires. I was directly involved with PVSC's coordinated response to the wildfires with the affected municipalities. Our 2024 assessments consider the impact of those 2023 wildfires, as well as the flash flooding that took place in July. So we had a little bit of both, as everyone is aware. And we work directly with our impacted municipal partners to share information and communicate with affected property owners. So as these disasters were unfolding, our first call was to the municipalities to discuss what information do you know and how can we share information to be as effective as we can in managing our response to the natural disasters, making sure that our assessments are correct for the following year, and working with municipalities on tax relief as well. We continue to monitor the impacted areas closely for market trends and rebuilding efforts. So this is looking at sales data again to determine if there's a future market impact or a stigma associated with how these natural disasters have affected certain local areas. So I'll touch very briefly on the inquiry and appeal period, which ends tomorrow. Within assessment, we say inquiry period for the first 31 days following the assessment notices being mailed out. This is when we see a significantly increased volume of phone calls into our office. I would certainly recommend with the municipal staff in the meeting, if you have inquiries from property owners, the best thing they can do is give us a call and discuss their assessment and some of the changes and why those changes may have taken place. As Paul mentioned, where the appeal period is ending tomorrow, February 8th of 2024, we need to receive appeals by tomorrow night at midnight in order to be able to process those appeals for this year. So if anyone is considering an appeal, now is the time to submit it for 2024. Outside of that appeal period, we don't have a legislative ability to change assessments. We can always have a conversation about future assessment roll years. So we always encourage property owners, even if it is the middle of the summer and they have some concerns about their assessment, as long as they understand that changes may not affect the existing assessment roll year, we're always happy to have that conversation and discuss physical changes to the property that we may not be aware of and how those may affect the assessment. So our assessment notices went out January 8th. Appeal period ends tomorrow at midnight, Thursday, February 8th. We have 60 assessors on the phone until Friday to answer inquiries from property owners. We will reduce that number significantly following the inquiry period, as we typically see a significant decrease in our volume of inquiries. However, there's always an assessor available daily throughout the year during business hours to discuss property assessment with property owners or their representatives, so their agents. Appeals can be emailed, mailed, or faxed. I would certainly highly recommend the email option or fax at this point, where the mail is unlikely to reach us by the deadline, given the timing on February 7th. And the appeal form has to be signed to be accepted. So it needs to be signed by the owner for us to be able to log that appeal. We encourage property owners to contact us at these numbers anytime. And we do have a unique email address for municipal staff as well. That email address allows you to reach Paul directly, who is an expert at triaging municipal affairs, and will certainly find the appropriate staff member within PVSC to answer your question as quickly as possible. So thank you again for listening to our presentation, and I'll open the floor to some questions. What I'm going to do is I'll drop the slideshow here so that I'm able to see the video a little bit better. And thanks again for listening.
Questions?
I had one quick question, either for Paul or Rod. I'm just wondering, when was it, Rod? Was it when it's capped, when a property is capped and it sells, does the cap stay on or is it lifted?
Great
and
question.
The cap is gone.
So,
Okay.
so if typically the cap resets. So the easiest way to think of it is that cap that is on that property would go. Like the easiest way to think of it is it belongs with that owner. Now the owner can't take it to another property, but it belongs with that owner and with that property. So when a property sells in a market transaction, the new owner, should they meet all of the other eligibility requirements, which are detailed on our website, but residency is a big one. The number of units has to be 3 units or less. These types of things. With that, if they meet all of the other eligibility requirements, then they would have a cap calculated on whatever their assessment is in the year following their purchase. So what that allows us to do is review that sales transaction, understand what's sold, and make sure that what's assessed represents what's sold. So if the property has had some renovations or there's been physical changes that we're not aware of through a permit process, we would correct that data at that time, make sure that the account is correct, and then that owner, should they meet all the eligibility requirements, will be capped in the future. There's no eligibility required. So that's all automatic in our system.
It's automatic. They don't have to
In
reach
the
out
year
to you.
following purchase, you don't have a
Yeah.
cap typically. And the reason is there has to be a year that your cap is based on. That's how the cap works. It's what we call the base year.
Yeah.
So your
Mhm.
base year is the assessment year immediately following the calendar year and you purchase. So if you purchased in 2023, your base year will be the 2024 assessment roll. You'd be capped on that moving forward.
Okay,
Typically, the longer you remain capped, the longer you stay in the property, and the more years that there's a distance between that CPI and the assessed values changing, your cap advantage, or the distance between your assessed value and your cap, your taxable assessment, can get larger. So folks who've occupied a property for a number of years often see a significantly larger cap or bigger difference between the two numbers than someone who's only occupied a property for a couple of years. Does that make sense? And then the only exception is family transaction. There's no limit or no wording in the cap that has anything to do with value. So you can purchase a property for market value from a parent, sibling, child, or the reverse. Grandparent is also included. So direct family member, as specified in the cap. In those situations where it's what we call a family transaction, that previous cap can carry through. We still could potentially adjust a cap for physical changes. So if you inherit a property and the previous cap that existed could potentially continue, in that case, if you're a direct family member. However, if you extensively renovate the property or put a large addition on it, build a significant outbuilding, this type of thing, we would make an adjustment to the cap for that physical change, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
yes, thank you.
No problem.
I have a further question on that capping when you take it off.
Sure.
So if you bought a property, we'll just do an example. If it was $300,000 now and you bought it for $6 million, the capping after a year starts at the $6 million, the new market value?
So I would say it depends on how that assessment existed at that time. So our assessments are 1 year retrospective. We don't always take a purchase price and make that the assessment, although it is a very strong indication of market value. It's not necessarily exactly where the assessment is going to go in the following year, if that makes sense. So, but what I will say with your example is that typically when we correct data on a property as part of a sales review. So if there's a significant distance between a purchase price and an assessment in your 600K, 300K example, for instance, where it's like a 50% difference, the first thing that the assessor is going to do when they review that sale is say, is what we have assessed to this property what was sold? And if the answer is yes, then it could be an indicator that the market is changing and future assessments may reflect that, but the following year's assessment may not, to the degree that other sales support that difference. However, in many cases, when there's a significant gap like that and we review the sale, we often find that the physical data on the property has changed a little bit, quite often the depreciation. So there's been some updates to the house or some changes that maybe for whatever reason we're not requiring of a building permit. So changing out things like kitchen cabinets, bath fixtures that can have some significant impact on a property's value, but we may not have been aware for one reason or another. So we have to correct that data as we become aware of it. And often that closes the gap a little bit between the purchase price and the assessed value in the following roll year. So wherever we land after we've reviewed that sale, and that's why you have that sort of 1 year gap where the following year's assessment is your base year, that allows us to review the sale, make sure it's captured. So it's difficult to have a straight answer, but I would say the easiest way that I would advise folks on that question is, in the year following the purchase of a property, it's reasonable to expect to pay an assessment that is similar to your purchase price, and you'll be capped on that on a go forward. Does that make sense? It may not exactly equal it because we have to have the additional market support, but often when we correct data, those large gaps are closed.
I think also just to add a little to that, in what we saw over the past few years is that, as you all know, people were fairly desperate to find housing and to purchase properties, and they were purchased sight unseen. There was a bidding situation where they were, bidding higher than market value to get them and those types of things. So it's supply and demand. So we have to, you know, I wouldn't say that it was, you know, the majority, but certainly there were a number of cases where we would deem that it was not market value because it was overpaid. It was, you know, it was not what a willing buyer or a willing seller that normally knows that market would pay for that property. It was more of an influence as a result of COVID that caused some of the prices to go up. So during COVID, with some of these very large prices, the assessment did not get up to where the sale price was by any means.
That's
And
a great
we're
point.
using groupings of properties too. So we're working with means and medians when we change the market values going forward for the municipality and the various neighborhoods as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So we can't always get there, but we always correct the data and make sure that we're, you know, as close as we can be once that data is corrected and we have the additional market support. If it's a complete outlier and represents a significant overpayment to what's typical in the market, then we reflect that difference in the assessment, as Paul mentioned. So in a situation where there's a very non-typical sale, we may not be able to get there on assessment reflecting mass appraisal.
Other questions?
I'll just say that as a property owner, I love the cap system. As a counselor, not so much. Going back to the point that Michael made, it seems to me that there's a lag in terms of sale prices catching up to assessments. So if property sold in February, by the following January, the assessment may have come up, but it does not match the sale price. And that usually doesn't happen until the following year, by which time the property has already been capped. Would that be an accurate observation?
I think it depends on the scenario. So there could be a couple reasons why that's happening. In that scenario where there's another increase or a significant increase in the year following, part of it could be due to our retrospective market as well. So as Paul mentioned, we're looking a year behind. So while we correct physical data year over year, whatever market is indicated by that sale doesn't go into the assessments for 2 years. Does that make sense? Because it's the physical state is only retrospective by a couple months. So if we find that the house is significantly renovated, then what we would do is we maybe make an adjustment to the depreciation, or let's say there's an outbuilding that we haven't captured accurately, something like that. So we would make those physical changes and they're reflected immediately in the year following the assessment roll. But whatever that sale is telling us in the mass appraisal system doesn't go in for another year, because that sale is not in the assessments for the following assessment roll year. Does that make sense? It's a bit of a it's hard on the head. I can admit with the 2 dates, but really the reason is to make sure that quality data goes into our reassessment, so nothing goes into the mass appraisal system until we understand it to be a market sale, and we need that time to be able to review those sales that go in there. With physical data, we want to be able to capture as close to that date as possible, and that just allows us to capture new construction and sort of whatever is happening over that building season.
So I think your observation is a good one, and I'll just once again give you a little bit of an example here. The residential lift, we'll call it, the market value increases for the past 5 years, going back to 2020, were for Annapolis Royal were 2.4%. Then in 21, it was 2.1%. In 2022, it was 13%. In 2023, it was 8.6%. And in 2024, it's 22%. So COVID started right in that 2021 period. But you really didn't see anything really start to really impact until 2023 and 2024. That's where it really hit on the assessments. So you're quite right. The sales that are for 2024 actually occurred throughout 2022. So 2022 was in the heart, sort of in that tail end or even the heart of COVID. So we're just getting through that COVID bubble right now with this 2024 assessment.
Cool.
Question, Paul or Rod. So 84% of our residential properties saw the assessment was capped. The
80
remainder,
Oh, yes,
84.
sorry.
yeah, okay, the remainder of that saw an increase in their assessed value that wasn't capped. So are you basing that increase on permits, or how do you do that mass assessment of that section of properties that are not capped? Or saw a rise above the cap?
Rod and I'll fight each other on this one, but I'll let Rod win.
You can have Paul if you want, but I think great question. So the answer in terms of how the properties are valued, all the properties, whether they're capped or not, have an assessed value. So the cap is not even in the analysis, right? So we're calculating an assessed value based on market sales activity for everything, and then everything that's capped is paying taxes on a different number. Their taxable assessment is based on a previous year's assessment brought forward by the CPI, but they're all valued on the direct sales method, with the same methodology. So using that mass appraisal system with what we call qualified sales. So sales that have been reviewed, determined to represent the market for a given area, and those are applied to determine how the market should move year over year. Every year we bring in a whole new year of sales into the system. So we say, okay, these sales have happened since the last time we did a reassessment. How has the market changed year over year, and how should the assessments change as a result of that? That's where that increase goes. If the question relates more to the 22% figure that I quoted from my previous slide there around the overall residential assessment lift, that lift is market, but it's also permit activity. So it's a little bit of both, and there would be a little, I don't have the detail here to sort of split that out, because it's when I say 22% overall on the residential assessment lift, that doesn't mean that every residential property increased 22%. It means that the overall lift, if you take the number from last year and the number for this year, the difference is 22%. Does that make sense?
Yes, but what I'm really trying to get at is I've talked to some people that said the tax assessment rose significantly, but they don't know why. They didn't do any renovations. Was that because perhaps they were next door to a property that sold, and therefore their property is now increased in value as well?
The answer is the market, right? So I often, and this has been a very sort of common question this year, so it's a great question from all of the councils around the example of a property where nothing physically changes. Why should the assessment change? But the answer is we follow the market. The market has changed year over year. So we're seeing, when we look at that retrospective market evidence again, so we've seen, as everyone is aware, a little bit of a flattening of the market, perhaps not a decrease, but a flattening of the market over the past 6 to 10 months here in the province. But what that will do for that is for next year's assessments to determine, how that is impacting. But for this year, we're reflecting basically the end of 2022, January 1st, 23. It was still a very hot market. We started to see a little bit of a softening towards the very end of 2023. But looking at that trending, and what we do is we determine each sale that happened in that calendar year, we trend it forward to what we call the base date, so that January 1st date. So if something sold 2 or 3 months previous, we would adjust that sale to the base date. So if we've seen a little bit of a decrease, we'd adjust that to make sure that we're reflecting exactly on that date what the market conditions were. And in properties where nothing has changed, really, and it's the same in all real property, and a lot of property owners, you have to kind of I'd say get into the headspace of a property that if you were thinking of selling your property, would you sell it for exactly the same as you did 5 years ago, or would it be more? So even if nothing has changed on a property, most people still understand that their property overall is gaining in value. And the reason is that the land is increasing faster than the building is depreciating. So the overall gain, even though nothing was physically changing, is still there on that property. And we use the sales of properties to predict how properties that haven't sold would sell. And that's basically that market value, or that section 42 of the Act that we are required to follow.
Okay, thank you.
Do you guys use some sort of factors when you determine this? Like previously mentioned, you make adjustments for properties that are overpriced, that are not the norm. Do you adjust when you're doing the mass appraisal side of it? Are there factors that you do when you say, okay, there's, I don't know, a group of houses that sold in Annapolis that were a lot higher than normal? And then now you're doing a mass appraisal, so you're increasing all the cap properties as well that are surrounding these houses. Like, what's your determination of this? How do you factor in that?
We review houses, sort of all houses in a homogeneous geographic region under mass appraisal. And we determine what the market value is based on our review on these properties. And we use that, means and medians, statistical testing, assessment to sales ratios, things like that, to say that are our assessments at the market based on the grouping of these sales? We don't, and if the answer is we are below the market, then based on the act, we must move it to where the market would be. So if we're 20% below the market, based on, our assessments, based on the sale price, the grouping of all these sales using statistical testing, if we're 20% below, then we, under the act, need to move those assessments up towards the market value in those neighborhoods. So you're right, it does impact the entire neighborhood as far as the movements in the market, and not all houses sell. But statistically, if we have the evidence of enough sales, that is what determines how much the market will move. Sometimes we don't have enough sales in neighborhoods in order to make a determination as to whether it should move or not. But the past few years, it's been quite strong, very robust in that the sales were there, the market movements were there. And that's where you're seeing some of these numbers coming from. I don't know if Rod wants to jump in there and add a little bit or not.
No, I think that more or less covers it, but really it comes down to those, what we call sort of an assessment to sale ratio and unique areas, So if an area is determined to be significantly different or represent a different market. So an example is in an older community where all of the dwellings in the area are say 70, 80, 90 years old or more, and there's new construction where the type of dwelling being constructed and the area that sort of surrounds that is significantly different, we might treat those sales differently than sales of the exact same property. So we may identify and say, okay, well, this is really kind of a different market. So, maybe we make a different decision on how we determine how those properties move. So we do identify different classes of property to determine is it comparable as well? Does it represent the market for the population of dwellings? Another example is if you had a property that sold that was a very executive property, or a property that was in very poor condition, like a tear down that sold for the land value, for instance, we often wouldn't use a sale like that to make a prediction or to sort of hang our hats on when making an assessment decision for a group of typical properties, because we want to know what does the typical property sell for. So if it's an outlier, or if it represents non-typical sale conditions or a non-typical improvement, then we're going to take a much closer look at that property and adjust sort of the weight that we would place on that sales evidence.
Can I just jump in there, Rod? So we have that in our town. We have unique properties abutting other properties. So we would have, say, a tiny home, or not quite a tiny home, but a small, modern, brand new constructed home across the street from large historical designated properties.
Sure.
So we don't have the typical geographic area of like a cul-de-sac. Well, we have that as well, actually. So how do you determine value when we have so many unique properties in our town? Is it per property?
Right. So I'll say every property is unique, and how that property is assessed is it's the sales data telling us, but it's also the characteristics for that property individually. So if you have a very small home, like a bungalow on a slab, or even an extreme situation, a tiny home or something like that, when compared to an enormous Victorian mansion, as many beautiful homes exist in Annapolis Royal. Always nice to drive through there, and we have many properties that are 7,000-8,000 square feet. And so, of course, there's going to be a very different sale price per square foot indicated, a different depreciation, all of those things. But we take that into account when we collect the data for the individual property. So we're looking at square footage and determining how that contributes as well. So that's why property data is so important to us, and the site inspections that we complete for things like building permits, appeals, sales reviews, property owners giving us a call if they ask to have something looked at on their property. We're typically happy to complete that review to be able to understand what's there on the property. And what we really want to know is if something is non-typical. So non-typical in either direction, but if a property is in very poor condition, or if there's something atypical about it that's not within the normal or the typical for the area, then that's something that we want to be aware of. In many cases, we are of course in the data that we have, but we want to make sure that we're accurately reflecting that data so we can then determine what impact does that have on the market.
I'll give you a bit of an example, and I'll use the Academy again, and just to give you a feel. Over the past 3 years, the Academy had 4 sales that we used in our analysis, 2 prior rolls ago, and then it was 10 for last year's roll, and it's 8 sales for this year's roll. And the average selling price for those 8 sales for this year's roll was $259,000. When you're talking 8 sales in a property that has 38 property, that's statistically very significant and is good data. It's a good database. So the average sale in the academies was $259,000 for the period that we use for market valuation for the 2024 roll. The actual average assessment, not including the cap, was $255,000. So the average sale, $259,000, average assessment, $255,000. And so the prior year, it went, it went up to $255,000 based on those sales. The prior year it was $213,000. So it was up, from $213,000 to $255,000. And it's easy to sort of show the example of something like the Academy, in that we had 8 sales for this roll, we had 10 sales for the prior roll. That makes a very strong case for market evidence on the sales of those homogeneous type properties, and most of them probably didn't have much for improvements year over year, that type of thing. So that's kind of that's probably about as simplified a form that we get for determining market values, is when you have similar situations such as the Academy and the condo sales.
I have one last question.
I do too. Go after you.
Can you briefly describe what the seasonal tours business section that you guys manage covers?
It essentially allows a tax reduction for those businesses that are eligible, that are considered seasonal business, seasonal tourist business, and those businesses need to apply for it every year. I think it's by the end of September or sometime in September, and it's
say I'm holding up a 1 for September 1st.
September 1st. September 1st, and it only includes a narrow types of proper or seasonal businesses. Campgrounds is one, roofed accommodations is another, and the third is restaurants.
And you have to be closed for 4 months of the year.
Yeah.
So it's an incentive to close, as opposed to an incentive to be operating all year.
You also have to be classified as commercial, so it's not available to a property that's classified residentially.
Yes.
So something like a bed and breakfast, if they meet the test of being residentially classified, they get the residential rate. There's nothing to apply the seasonal reduction to. And I think how that reduction is applied is to a certain degree unique to the individual municipality applying it. Paul, feel free to jump in here, but my understanding is it's a blending of the commercial and the residential rate, and really the question would be most appropriately directed to your finance executives in terms of how that would be applied hypothetically. But Paul has elaborated a little bit on the requirements. We can split properties as well, so it's possible to apply seasonal to a portion. Bed and breakfast with restaurant is a good example where the B&B would not be eligible based on the fact that most bed and breakfasts are residentially classified or get the residential tax rate. But the attached restaurant, if closed and meeting the other requirements, could potentially be eligible. So that commercial portion could potentially get a reduction in the rate if they apply by the deadline, but the annual application is critical. So very different than the cap, which is automatic. Seasonal tourist is an annual application to us, has to be in by September 1st for the following assessment roll year.
I think to the mayor's point, although it needs to be applied for every year, but as you say, I guess the business owner is going to have to make a decision as to whether they apply for it or want to apply for it, or whether they're on the fence as to whether they should stay open for the whole winter, or should I apply for the seasonal rate. So yeah, it's kind of a decision factor that the individual business has to make, but not all businesses are eligible for it by any means. It's just those 3 specific types of businesses, and they need to apply for it every year. And I believe it comes down to a reduction in the commercial tax rate during that closed period, or that period that's considered the seasonal period. I'm not an expert on it by any means, other than you have to apply for it. And now it's September 1st.
Yeah, it's my understanding it's a blending of the rate, but I think there is some opportunity for municipalities to have some control via the MGA of exactly how that's applied, is my understanding.
Thank you. All the other questions?
Yeah, just a quick question about appeals. So was I right in hearing that Annapolis Royal had 20 appeals last year?
Correct.
Is that right? Was that
21, I think.
Yeah, I think
okay.
it's
So I'm just curious, what percentage of the appeals result in successful reassessment for the property owner?
1 in 4.
Is it like 50-50, you know?
According to the annual report,
Roughly.
it's less than 1%.
Well, we had the question last night in Barrington as well, and so we looked for tonight. And but when Rod answered it last night, it was an insightful answer in that what's considered successful. To us, property owner phones us, says, I don't understand the values. You know, I want to check this out, want to check that out. And after talking to us and us going through it and everything else, they say, oh, that makes sense. And yes, I agree that that's within market value of my property. So I'm going to withdraw it. So that's kind of successful, and the property owner knows. But as far as dollar value adjustments made, 19%. 4 out of 21.
And that 19%, I think Paul had a great point last night that I'll add tonight for the same question, and it's a great question, is that 19% represents some changes that may not be related to market. So that's changes to taxable assessment, as we would report to a municipality, because, you know, we want to, of course, report the difference in taxable dollars available to a municipal council, for instance. But when someone gets their cap back, for instance, so let's say it was a family transaction, someone passed away, left their property to their married daughter who has a married name. If we're not made aware of that at the time of transaction, our system is going to determine that to be a market sale, or what we call a non-family sale, because there's no way that we could possibly know that those two parties are related. So that's one of those. It's another sort of great tip or about, you know, calling us when property's transacting or talking with PVSC about it, is that if we're aware in the previous year as the transaction is happening, we can just fix that proactively. It doesn't need an appeal, make sure the property remains capped. But there are scenarios, and the married female child is the vast majority of the scenarios where a property ought to be capped and is not. So we may, if it's this time of year, property owner calls and says, why don't I have a cap? I inherited this from my parents. We say, no issue. We have no issue bringing that cap back on the property. Just send us in an appeal. And that's the most efficient and sort of effective way to get that done quickly for a property owner. So we do that. And that adjustment would go into that sort of 1 in 5 or 19%, which is very consistent with the province. So Annapolis is 19%. I think we landed just over 19% on residential appeals in the province. So very, very consistent with what we see province-wide.
I'll also say that of those 21, I'm only aware of one that was dissatisfied after they sort of got their decision from us, or, you know, whether it be an adjustment or a withdrawal or confirmation. I'm only aware of one that took it further to the NSAT tribunal for the independent look at it.
I know I had one that was commercial, and it was the mass appraisal that affected my property, and I made an appeal on that. And the commercial side of it is they're all so unique that I can't see how they can be homogeneous as a grouping, right? So
yeah, I can say it really depends on how the property is valued. So I'm not sure if we're talking about like multifamily or mixed use rescom or sort of what the nature of that commercial property is, because our commercial properties are predominantly valued using either income, so a model based on sales of properties that have sold, looking at what those properties earn, right? And then what we take a look at on appeal is is your property producing a similar income to what a typical property in our model is producing? If yes, then we presume it would sell for a similar price. If not, then we take a little bit of a look further. The other thing we do is cost commercial property. So if you have a warehouse, large industrial building, anything built for a special purpose, all of those things we determine the value of the land based on sales of vacant land and then add the depreciated cost of the buildings to that. So it depends a little bit on the valuation method. Cost stuff is not valued on mass appraisal, generally speaking. We're sort of looking at a costing model that gives us a typical depreciation for that structure. And then, so oftentimes when we're discussing commercial property with owners, what we're talking about, because it has the largest value impact, is how depreciated is the building? Is it depreciated more than we understand it to be, or less? And that really has a significant effect on sale price in costed commercial structure. So I'm not, without knowing exactly what we're talking about in this forum, it's difficult, but there are some significant differences in how we approach commercial valuation and commercial appeals.
Can Bill ask a question?
That's,
Yeah.
yes, go ahead, Bill, you have a question?
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, just a point of clarification. Did I hear you say that the capped assessments went across the board 3.5% up?
3.2 for this year.
Okay, are there any exceptions to the rule, or is that universal?
Universal. The only exception would be if there was a physical change to the property that was added into the cap. So if you add something to a property, physically change it, the cap can increase. The cap doesn't decrease when you remove something from a property. So cap can only increase, it can't decrease. So if you remove something from a property, that doesn't mean that your cap goes down. But if you add something, it does mean that your cap goes up. And that's the legislation. That's how it's written. There's nothing in the legislation that allows it to decrease. It can only increase, but it can only increase by the consumer price index for that year, plus the cost of any changes to that property. But those changes will then be capped as well. They're just added to your existing cap, if that makes sense.
It does. So for Annapolis Royal, you've got the numbers in front of you. Has there been a greater increase on some residences in Annapolis Royal above that 3.2%?
So the only increases that would be beyond that would be related to our permit work in Annapolis. So where that's a relatively small number of accounts, I'm just jumping back here. So 14 permits, some of which would have been commercial permits, I imagine, as well, for properties that aren't cap eligible. So any of those permits may have resulted in an inspection that would create a cap adjustment, presuming that property was eligible for cap. So in many cases with turnkey new construction, and I know this is not prevalent in Annapolis Royal, but if a new house is constructed and sold as a turnkey, that property owner won't be capped in the following year because they just purchased the property. So it really only applies to permit work, which is added to properties that are capped and continue to be capped, so haven't changed hands, if that makes sense. So I would say, you know, making an estimate, I don't have those numbers in front of me right now, but I would say it would be a small number of properties within Annapolis Royal that were subject to changes beyond the cap. And those folks, to a certain degree, should expect those changes as they would relate to physical changes on the property. But the vast majority of capped assessments would get that 3.2%.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Anybody else have a question?
Just one point, if people wonder, they should appeal. The process is very simple, very straightforward. Doesn't require a lot of paperwork.
No.
Anyway, just a point.
And certainly given the deadline now, I would encourage folks, if you're considering an appeal, the best thing is to get that appeal in the next day so that we have that ability or that instrument, because as Paul mentioned, you can always withdraw the appeal. And many of the withdrawals that we get are the result of someone who has sort of read the assessment, had a bit of sort of sticker shock, if you will, sent that appeal in. It results in a contact from us. We have that conversation and everybody agrees at that point once we explain a little bit about why the changes have occurred. So certainly we're always happy to have it proactively, but I would certainly, where I know that we're broadcasting this, given the date and the deadline tomorrow, folks who are considering an appeal, the most important thing is to sign that form and submit it.
And I'll just put it up here, see if we can see it on the screen, but it's very simple. That's it.
Yeah.
On the back of your notice, that's it. Now, if you were to speak to us later on, if we were to pick up the phone and say, we see you appealed, and you say it's the value, then we would want a little more detail. But for now, it's that simple process. Take a photo of it at this late stage, sign it, fill it out, sign it, date it. Take a photo of it, email it to the email inquiries@pvsc.ca. Not that we want an influx of a whole bunch of appeals at this time, but there's probably people that are gonna stop, they're gonna stop you on the street 2 days from now and say, well, I think I might appeal, and you're gonna say, well, sorry, but if they stop you tomorrow, tell them to do that, or phone us first, one or the other.
I was going to say, Paul, you only have 27 hours to put your appeal in.
Yeah.
I'm joking. But in all seriousness, thank you for your time, everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity to answer some questions, and I'll let Paul have the final word.
Well, if you have more questions, just let CAO or let Melanie know, and they know how to get a hold of me. So if you have questions and want some clarification, by all means, they know where I am for sure. And it's always a pleasure to be in front of council.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you next year.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for the opportunity. Pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye now.
Public input. Anybody, public want to make a comment?
Actually, I would. Yesterday, I went down to Public Works to thank Ken and everybody down there for the work that they've been doing. Because I know that it's been a rocky road since Kevin retired, and not everybody was pleased with some of the changes and things. But everybody stepped up, and although I could talk about people who are going to feel the impact of even a 3.2% increase on their cap thing, and town's probably not inclined to change the mill rate to go down. Price of food has gone up 10% last year, and everybody's pretty concerned about those. But I just wanted to say thank you very much for, I know there's going to be a bill attached to it because of the costs, but as Ken was saying, local contractors stepped up, came with trucks and plows and bulldozers and everything else like that. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ken.
Well said.
Really
Yeah.
well done. Well done.
And thank you for arranging that. So yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
So moving on to new new business or?
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks for being here.
The Valley Waste Resource Management budget.
Yes, there it is.
Yeah, there it is.
So I did attend a meeting. I reviewed their budget in detail. And their cost of living 5.3%. They did have some cost that could be operational in their capital, so they've changed that because it's better for us if they can put it through the operating. And they also have a new employee wellness fund, $300 an employee. Those are just some things that I noted.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd point them out.
Well, I'm happy that we are 1.3% contributing to this budget. So
Yeah.
that sits well with me.
Wow. But legit, that's how it should be.
Yes.
I mean,
It's true.
we're not tinfoil, we're full, or,
That's right.
you know.
So the county is still looked at as just a, customer problem?
Right now, but it looks like the partnership's still possible. So we're
Oh,
in the
that's
2-year
good.
pilot period.
Right.
Things are going well.
Okay.
So they could change, but for the better.
And we probably couldn't get away with anything any cheaper to do our, I don't. I mean, maybe we could,
If we bought one truck, right, we had toast.
yeah, well, that's it, well, no, that's true, but I know.
Any hours, the pickup is just a.
And I have to say, they're very efficient, and if there are any issues, they usually deal with it quite quickly. We've had problems in the past where pickup was at weird times. I know it would be great to have pickup weekly in the summer with the compost in the business section, but, and then once a month in the winter. I mean, who could get it out yesterday? I did.
I got mine, I just got mine out.
And I'm gonna tell you, I really had to, good thing I go to Power Hour, but anyway.
Good thing you do. There's an advertisement.
Well, there wasn't a lot out up our way, like, I went out and looked to see if it was still on, and I was like, oh, there's 2 bags down there with it.
Blown around,
I'm like,
They were
yeah.
quick as a result.
yeah.
I'd like to see it at some point, their future strategic plan is to redo, not have single-use plastic bags that we put our garbage in.
I'm
the
glad you
campsite.
brought up strategic plan because that's been our hobby horse is where is it?
Right,
We know they've done a SWOT analysis and we've said, okay, can we see it?
right.
So 2 meetings, so every meeting I ask the same question,
Mm.
but the plan is that they're behind with the whole pilot project. They're about 6 months behind. January, they were supposed to start the strategic plan. So they're a $6 million operation running without a strategic plan.
Have they ever had a strategic plan?
No.
That's
Okay.
been our hobby horse is saying you need one.
Okay,
But they are preparing, like on the capital plan, it is a multi-year plan, so they have pieces of it.
right.
So it's better, things are going better than they
Yeah.
were.
But just to see, I mean, the opportunity to have containers, reusable containers instead of single-use plastic that we purchase to put our garbage in and then we just basically throw it away. To have what other
For
cities,
garbage or recycling or both?
oh, recycling,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah, recycling.
yeah, it would, yeah, that would.
Get
be
rid of blue
great, but-
bags.
That,
Have
yes,
containers.
having lived in Ontario at one point.
Right.
You know, you have recycling bins and it seems to make sense.
Yeah.
You know, that and the fact that we ship our garbage to Chester is kind of,
Mm.
I know it was out of mind, but it just strikes me as not very environmentally friendly.
And as a commercial owner, that one little bin would not work with recycle. I sometimes have 20
Right.
bags.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, I don't like to, but I honestly do.
Mhm.
It's a big thing, garbage day.
All
Yes.
your recycling is
like
going to
Christmas.
change with extended producer liability.
Right, that's coming down the line.
Yeah,
It
which
is
is good,
coming.
you know?
And there's a little article in the Town Crier, Stark Caldwell
Mhm,
interviewed the
that's
manager
right,
and put
yeah.
that in. But it means they're going to take over recycling. which means for residential, which means that we don't know who'll be picking it up. So never mind
Okay.
which bins, we don't, at this point, we don't know who,
Oh,
because they might contract it out to municipality or might not.
Mm,
So New Brunswick are ahead of us,
yeah,
other places are ahead of us, we're just behind.
so could it be weekly perhaps down the road?
I doubt
Because that
it,
would solve the problem with
because one thing-
large amounts.
One thing the town spoke out against, the last meeting, they wanted to have large item pickup every 2
Mm.
weeks. So you can imagine how that went. The towns,
Mm.
absolutely not. The counties wanted it
Mm.
because it would be cheaper,
Mhm.
but all the towns said, we can't have that because we'd have coaches out every.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, that would be,
And it would have reduced our costs, but it would have made every town look unsightly.
Right.
yeah, you can't have that. But I do think there are ways that it doesn't have to be that straight every 2 weeks. You know, like I said, in the summer, I really
With the
think,
compost bins.
yes, and I know that there's an extra expense, but honestly, in the winter time, we could get away with holding on to that compost for a month. We could. Even, there are no restaurants typically opened, and the ones that aren't overly busy, that, you know, you could handle that
Mm.
compost in the winter.
And there's no leaf and yard waste going in those compost bins in the winter.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
it's, you know,
Good point.
It's a good point.
it's
So
something
lesson
that they really need to look at, like,
Mm.
you know,
Well, they're doing
common
the
sense.
strategic plan, so any comments?
okay.
Feel free to send them in.
Wasn't there a program though where you can get in-house composters?
Or they did a presentation, it was
Yes.
amazing, but we had to put
Countertop.
money, yeah,
I have one. but
I know,
You should have one too.
I need several.
They
They
had
would-
one, they had one on sale at Christmas.
But that kind of stuff is, anyway,
It makes a huge difference.
but they are, you know, they're reliable and good service for us.
And for our cost, I think.
Yeah,
I actually have a raccoon that comes and cleans up my
Oh,
compost
me too.
bin for me,
Yeah.
so.
yeah, no. It is very helpful. You're right, Paul.
Bungee cords.
Just
Okay.
makes them
So
smarter.
we have a motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would recommend to council to approve the updated appendix B of the capital equipment replacement policy.
sorry, we're on
Whoops, wrong one.
Valley Waste
I would
at the top.
recommend to council to approve the Valley Waste Resource Management operating budget of, is it $6,859,565 with the Annapolis portion of $89,638 for the fiscal year of 2024-2025.
Seconded.
Go ahead, Paul.
I will.
Paul.
Further discussion?
Mm.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Against, motion is passed. Okay, we're into unfinished business. Snow and ice control policy, number 2023-09.
So yeah, this was brought up at our last meeting. And we have Ken here, which is good.
I just want to let you, just to make you aware that if you change a policy, as it says, the specific MGA portion, 48 is attached, there's a time involved. There's at least 7 days.
Okay.
And then for a bylaw, it would probably be the end of March before that could be changed. There's first and second reading and all that, so.
But we can change our policy without changing our bylaw if that is a thing.
Yeah.
Depending on
and
which
that-
aspect you're changing.
Exactly.
And if you'd like a legal opinion, we had $7,500 for legal costs in the budget. To date, we've only spent $150. So there is money if you want a legal opinion as well.
Maybe you can explain this. It says give at least 7 days notice to all council members.
I noticed that.
I think we all know.
That is, I believe, the 7 days that you're required to,
Yeah, so it's 7 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just exactly what it said. Great, thank you.
So this was obviously spurred on because we've had concerns about the snow not getting plowed
Yeah, I mean,
at
interestingly,
a
the
timely
concerns were raised
manner.
before the recent storm.
Yeah, let's
Yes.
get that one.
It's just timely.
Yeah.
And we have 5, is it 5 inch, 5 centimeters?
Which is
2 inches.
Losing mine.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
5 centimeters.
I think the sticking point is the responsibility of the business owners to clear the sidewalk outside
that
the
was
businesses.
And that's the
Right.
bylaw
That's the
component,
bylaw
but
component.
that's certainly generated a lot of discussion, yes.
and
Yeah.
that would definitely take till the end of March if
Yeah,
we
and-
change the
Yeah,
bylaw.
and I would recommend you get a legal opinion on that if that's the portion you want to
Yeah,
change.
okay.
Well, I was looking at it again, because I think it's something that it's, well, a legal opinion would be great, because I don't think it's enforceable for what we think it is.
From insurance point of view.
No, well, it's not property owned by the property owners, right? And they're responsible, and there's no details of when you gotta go out, how much has to be cleared, does it need to be salted, who's responsible for it? And the other thing that kind of jumps at me is, there's a lot of other areas in this town, St. Anthony Street, Victoria Street, that have commercial businesses on it, and they're not required to do it. By this bylaw. And I'm like, okay, so the post office doesn't have to clear theirs, anything on St. Anthony Street doesn't do it.
The post office
Lower-
does,
lower-
but-
They do. but
In
not
their
required.
driveway.
They clear a portion of the sidewalk and then that kind of stretches in front of them, not the entire, like the part that was the spectator.
Okay.
They don't clear that portion of the building, but certainly from that door forward through the parking lot,
Right.
they absolutely do. It's outside my window, so.
Well, I mean, I guess
You're like, thank you.
I mean, according to this, it's your property area, so they technically should be clearing the corner. Because if they're on the corner lot. But the other one is, once you go past the wharf, there's businesses down Lower St. George, and they're not required to do
It
it.
doesn't mention it in here.
No, it's just, my understanding is the intent was just the core business district would be responsible.
And I go, okay, so the core where my building is closed, vacant lot, or closed. And then you have the old post office.
Oh, okay.
On our side, and then there's a parking lot. So there's a museum, closed, and I'm going, so these property owners are required to clear that section according to this bylaw. And no other businesses further, another area even had to do it. And I'm going, I just can't see how we can enforce this on certain business owners and not other business owners. This doesn't lead, for me, it's the risk side of it. If I'm not salting it, and somebody slips in front of the sidewalk, am I responsible for that? I don't want it. I don't want that responsibility. Right? It's not something I think I should have to take on.
And it's not just the businesses, it's residential upstairs as well, so it's a multi-use area,
It's the owner or the occupant.
right? So
So.
it's too grey.
You know, what is the point of the policy or the bylaw? Is it to save money?
Yes, that was it.
Or is it to?
That was it.
Okay.
Or
That
is
was
it, or is it liability?
It was an engineer who recommended it to council way back when, and yes, it was part of a huge package to contain costs at a time when the town was, it had been under emergency funding for years.
Okay,
So it was a cost measure.
okay, I just have to jump in about the business sector area. It does get plowed, the same as, okay, yeah, so it strips, does get plowed, it does get salted. It's that section from where they salt and plow to my door. And that's my responsibility. Do you know, yes, it is, well, yes, it is.
It's all your responsibility, but. the town's
Well, what I'm
owner-
saying is, so if we change the policy and Public Works is responsible, do you now cut in right to my steps? Or do you still just do what he's doing anyway, which he's doing in front of your business and in front of everyone's business, right? He's doing the strip. He's doing the salting. It's that step in to your steps or to your door.
Well, where's your property line?
Well, many businesses, their steps actually encroach
Uh,
into it, so the business
it's
kind of
some
stops
are
at the front of the
different.
building, but in many cases, the steps are proud of the front of the building.
mhm.
as you say, we plow and salt these areas anyway, and the truth is, they're the first priority in the
Yeah.
mornings before we do any other part of town.
5:30-ish.
That said, if it were to change, were we responsible for going around? the
That's
steps
what I
and going
wanna
up the
know,
walls?
like,
That would be very, very difficult for us. For us to continue as we are with a 5 foot, 60 inch
like,
piece, straight path
it's getting
that we
done.
keep clean and
Yeah.
salted. That, doesn't, that's some change. Fine, we're
Yeah.
doing that every day it's done. We do that
First
in the core
thing,
first, and then different area, we have like a priority or ranking. That's fine, but again, if the change is going to be made, and I'm not going to address the liability, I'm not a specialist there, but operationally, if the change is going to be made, every nook and cranny, the frequency which it's done,
How
that
would
all
you
needs to
do
be
it?
considered, because.
you know what I
that
mean?
could
Like,
be
would that be even,
You wouldn't do it.
yeah, like how? Okay, so, for example, Upper St. George, you guys plow the
Mhm.
sidewalks, but you don't go right up to the doorstep of every home. Do you know what I'm
You
saying?
don't clean out the driveways. It'd be-
Exactly,
private
so-
driveway, that's not part of your requirement.
No,
So
we
is-
make every attempt not to fill
Fill
the
it
ends
in.
of the driveways, but
Yeah.
that's kind of where it stops.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, clearing that straight line right through the business sector and the residential sector it's the same. You just do your loop, put your salt in front of your spot, it's cleaned and right now. And my spot, and you guys did that, and I did the piece off of that.
When you go down Lower St. George, you're just doing the 5 foot wide.
Yeah,
straight
the
say,
sidewalk,
walk
I mean, the
through.
sidewalk is exactly.
Yeah,
and
so it's no different.
We
It's
just,
no
we continue
different.
on, it's just a lower priority than the core business, but yeah, we do it, we treat it just like we treat Upper St. George as well. We do the entire sidewalk to the 201.
Yeah, yeah.
But according to the bylaw, you're not supposed to do it, but you have been doing it anyway.
In the core, yeah.
Yeah, from three
Yeah,
to
in
four.
the snow policy, so the bylaw states the requirement for building owners. It's the
Right.
property owner responsibility, which can be shifted to the business. But anyway, the bylaw sets that requirement. In the snow policy, we state we will do it as a courtesy.
Yeah,
So we have committed to do it, and in practice, we absolutely do it, but we're saying, my understanding is, I wasn't here then, my understanding is what we're saying is, property owners, this is your job, but we understand it's a big job, for this recent storm, it would have been horrible to be shoveling, as you were saying. Some of the drifts were just massive, it would be horrible to try and shovel this, and we obviously have equipment. For us to come through and make the big pass and get, 90% of the stuff that's there away, and then having the support of others, you have to kind of clean the nooks and crannies. I find that very workable from my personal perspective,
Okay.
as public works. Yeah, so that works well. Again, so we call it a courtesy, but it's stronger than that because we do it first. It's the highest priority. We do it every single time. We don't give it a miss.
and,
And
yeah,
there's certain areas in the core that you have to do anyways that are
Oh,
public.
Market Square,
In front of
yeah,
the,
the or
Lighthouse.
next to the theater, right? Because technically we own that, all these things, yeah, absolutely.
so, yeah,
Town hall.
so you
Yeah.
no point in lifting the blade and going to the.
yeah.
No, that would be
Take that.
unworkable as well.
And I mean, I think it really spurred to those weekends that Public Works, it was time and a half or more than time and a half. on
Double
a s-
time.
Double time on a Sunday that caused a little anxiety, shall I say.
I mean,
into-
that wasn't a consideration then, I guess, if I'm running down what makes me decide to go out or not. So
That's,
first thing is
yes.
always safety. It could be 5 mil of snow, but if it's like a little bit of snow over ice, we're going out,
Yeah,
period. Then the second thing that's guiding me is the policy, right? So
Right.
and this was the weekend that caused the
that's when it
consternation.
all came
It
to it.
was just under 5 mil of snow, but it was very dry. There was no under ice. And I judged that as to be very walkable because it was light, dry
Mhm.
snow, right? And not the same as walking on bare pavement, guaranteed, but it's Canada in January. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't slippery. So this is the judgment call I made. So that was 2. Budget factors in, but really only after those things, right? I'm not gonna hire 500 casuals to shovel the streets because I can get it done faster, right? That would be irresponsible in terms of budget, even though, oh, look, you're done faster. So, I have to have an eye on budget, but it's only after safety and it's only after the policy, which council has determined is appropriate.
Yeah, that was the sticking point, I think, for why we're looking at it again, obviously that weekend and.
And then just to add some color to this. So when I came last time when we spoke about it, I said, we had used $10,000, about a third of our salt budget. And it was equal about a third of our overtime budget. Since then, I am over 50% of my salt budget and I have used every penny and probably a few more pennies of my overtime budget.
Now, I will ask, I heard that the federal government is gonna be giving out some help to Nova Scotia for snow removal and cleanup. I hope that they won't forget Annapolis.
Yeah.
Always
In my
willing to receive
experience,
help.
when we've filed before. It takes years, 7 years to get that money.
7 years.
Yeah.
Just a little point on the salt. So it's worrying that we're at 50% of our salt budget already. I have noticed, and no criticism at all, but I've just noticed that the coverage of salt is quite thick on many sidewalks, very, very thick, in fact. Is there any way we can change the distribution of salt so it's more of a sprinkle than a coverage?
Ish. So the
Okay.
reason why it comes out so heavy is just because the equipment is so worn. It's
It's so what?
worn.
Worn.
Yeah, I mean, we have refurbished the equipment. Everything is on its tightest setting, that's the slowest. The only way we can have salt be lighter is to dry faster. And so then it spreads out more. I mean, literally, if we we try not to even salt and plow at the same time, because then we're moving too slow and it gets super, super heavy, right? So we do a pass and plow and then turn around at the end of the block and come back so we can more quickly come back and get a spread. I'll talk a little bit about the equipment later, but so that is the only way. Now, that said, salt is based on fuel prices and it's $120 a ton. Right, and so the hopper on the small tractor holds it's 400 pounds. It's a metric ton, it's the $120, but it's 400 pounds. So it's not a lot of money, and even if it's coming out 30% faster than we'd like it to, we're looking at $20, $30.
Okay.
Yeah, so of our salt budget, the sidewalk portion isn't the most significant portion. It's the trunk, the 1 ton spreading the salt. That holds 3,000 kilos of salt in one load, and we'll use a full load, which is, it's a 3 tons. A full load easily to get the town on a not heavy day. Just
On the roads?
Yeah, on the roads. So the
Okay.
roads takes the bulk of the salt. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, we put a fair bit on the sidewalks, but when budgetary, that's not the bulk of it. It's the roads that's really
Okay.
eating that budget up.
And is sand or some kind of grit cheaper than salt? Because
It
some
had been
towns
used in the
use that.
past,
Okay.
and the problem with using sand, and sometimes sand is just the most appropriate thing when it's like super packed snow and you're not gonna melt through it and you need to make a frictive surface. But it wreaks havoc on our septic systems.
Yeah.
It gets into the
yeah.
drip chambers, it can clog the pumps and things like that. So
Right.
unless it's extreme, we try not to use that. And that was one of the things we removed when we did the policy update
Right,
last
just
year,
recently.
was taking the sand
Sand
out
out.
because in
Mhm.
practice,
We
it
did.
ended up being more expensive and more difficult for the small gain. So,
Oh.
we debated getting sand for the parking lot, the small parking lot behind like Farfetched, because that's where our ice rink is right now. It's packed down really, really hard and it just, the loader was having trouble the other day and then we were looking at it. It's supposed to be warm enough this weekend. We think we can break it up and push it off, without doing that. But it is an option. It's like a frictive, solution of last resort.
Okay, thank you.
Technical words.
So.
Yeah, what are we gonna do?
Revisiting?
Well, I don't think there's any change in the policy per se. I think for me, it's the bylaw or the street and sidewalks bylaw.
The policy would have to change though,
With that.
the second and third paragraphs of section 2. Because it refers to the bylaw.
Right.
So
Right, yeah,
what-
that paragraph in section 2.
The policy is simply easier to change. The core responsibility, we have to do the bylaw.
Yeah, So you'd have to change both.
And then we'd have to change the bylaw, not only to section 8 of the bylaw, I guess. But we probably would want to rewrite it because, well, we may want to make it a formal responsibility as opposed to something we just do voluntarily. We also have to stress that we are not doing it up to the doors of
Yeah, I think the strip
business
that's
owners.
being done now is.
being done now,
is-
yeah.
That would be,
Normal practice.
yes.
That would certainly be my recommendation. Again, I won't address liability, but defining, saying from something like from the curb to 5 feet, sorry, it's not metric, but 5 feet from the curb into the sidewalk, creating an accessible pathway is one thing.
For walkers.
But you know, I would find it difficult if we were on call to every business owner who says the sidewalk in front of my shop. I mean, a little bit, if I get a call and says it's really slippery here, can you do something?
Yeah.
Do something, but on call for everybody all the time to attend to the sidewalks would be difficult. So if we could, you know, defining the width of the pathway, the frequency by which we determine how to plow and make these judgment calls, that would certainly be useful.
And I think there's legal questions that absolutely should get answered.
Yeah, and which I cannot make any
You know,
recommendations.
what if we did this, if we did that,
Yeah.
so let's get some clarity.
Because there's accessibility part of parking your vehicle next to the curb, and then there's a mountain of snow, right?
Yeah.
So where do you draw the line?
And that's something we remove anyway. I mean,
You do,
see,
you go
then-
back.
then- yeah, and the first thing is the pathway or get the street clear, and it always ends up in awkward places. And then we push it into big awkward piles all over town, and then the last phase is getting loaders in, and now we have a gigantic mountain of snow behind the fire hall. So everyone wants to see a lot of snow go there. I think we're gonna open a ski slope there, it's gonna look
I
nice.
saw that.
So.
So I mean, you're doing that anyways, like you're
We are.
doing what we're talking about, you do the strip, and that's,
Yeah.
give pedestrians a pathway through. You remove the excess when you get to the point that you can remove the excess.
Yes.
So the only question was, I guess, with the individual businesses, those that are open should be clearing their own path to the ones that are open. Because if they're not open, then why should people be going in there anyways?
Yeah, they're not, and I don't know if it's an insurance issue that there should have, you know, on their own time, clearing the front or entranceway to their property. But that's, again, not really up to us to enforce, as long as we have a clear, clean, safe route around town.
That's right.
That's all we want. Then it's up to the responsibility. It doesn't matter if it's a business owner or residential owner. They're responsible for those types of,
Yeah, we're all responsible to clear our own driveways to allow
Yeah.
people to walk into their own houses.
yeah. But if you wanna scoop in and you wanna,
We
I
try to
go,
be helpful,
"Ramp,
and
but I gotta
sometimes if
deal
someone's
with-"
out there shoveling, we'll just gently go over
Give
and
them
take
a-
out more, and that's all right. You know, they're working
I have
hard,
a
we can
ramp
make their
I
life easier.
I did
deal with.
that from a couple of neighbors down that I know that they shovel, and I'm like, yeah, that's a little hard pack to be shoveling.
Oh.
Yeah,
We don't want anyone having a heart attack.
No. So, going back to this then, are we making a change to the policy now, or where we're,
I
So-
don't think we need a legal opinion.
Yeah,
So
for
you wanna do
sure
that
we
first?
can.
Yeah, I think a few people mentioned that. This
So
would be
what-
prudent.
So what are we gonna,
I guess we're talking the legal opinion on that bylaw, like the green sidewalk bylaw? So, if we're going to her legal opinion, are we going to a legal opinion to say, okay, we wanna make a change to that, so.
Considering changes and what impact, like, is there a problem with the way we're doing it? Because obviously, if you had to explain an increase in budget, you'd say, well, what we're doing now, we can't get away with anymore, or whatever. So I'd like to know what the standing is, because I know there's at least one court case that Ken McLean was involved in, where it went to insurance, the lawyer was with us, and, you know, where everything was tested back then. Things may have changed since then. So I'd like to know the ramifications of the change from a legal standpoint.
So originally there was a talk at this conversation, is it a cost reason or is it a liability reason? You said it was a
Well,
cost.
Why, no, that
for
was why
clearing-
it came in at
That's
the
what I'm
time,
saying.
Yeah,
Why it came in is
Yeah.
because it was cost
it
saving.
was a way to save costs
So
and
have-
other units were doing it.
Right, so it had nothing to do with liability
No,
of
not at the
who
time.
clears a sidewalk, if somebody slips, it's then
No,
liable.
but there was at least one case that we were involved in where it was, you know, it was tested in terms of you know, it didn't come up as a,
Right.
in the case that we were dealing with, nobody challenged the policy. It was just a matter of, well, the ice was in this location and therefore, you know, it was the town's fault.
And was it in a business area
It
of
was an
town?
RCAC, as I recall. It was the question involved about less than a square foot.
Right, but that's residential though, that's the residential
Yeah,
area
but
of
when
town.
he's talking about that, they went over the practice, that this was the practice, the first plow would go in and but they didn't deal specifically with this liability question of businesses and all the rest.
Because it's in another section, it's below the lights.
I just don't see why we need a legal opinion.
Well, to me, on the liability issue, I'd like to know is what we're doing now, is it illegal? Is it really, what's the risk? I'd like to know, I just like the facts.
So Melanie, are you able to, do
Well, I
you know
could-
what we
Well, we need to clear-
want? Yeah,
Like, I mean,
send it off and.
I guess the question is in regards to this streets and sidewalks bylaw, if we remove it, right, we have the public works is now plowing the 5-foot stretch. I guess the question is there, the town's gonna be responsible for any sort of following the sidewalk in that core section anyway.
Right.
I guess the challenge was that what we're doing now may not be.
Well, I could just send them the
Yeah,
policy, the bylaw and say,
Yes,
is there,
get them to
is
look
there,
at it.
just look at it and see, is there something we
Exactly.
could, is there something we're doing wrong? Or should we, does it need to be enhanced or
Like, it's a
detracted?
Can
counted
you
risk
enforce
because
it?
of its current.
Or if we can enforce it, yeah.
That's key.
And
Yeah.
then I guess there's the liability side of it, because you're trying to put liability on the property owners. And the other side of it is we're only doing it in one section of the town where it's
It's biased to the downtown core, isn't it, in a way?
it's one section.
Yes,
of the town.
24 to.
To the wharf.
Drury Lane, yeah, wharf.
I
We
got, I got it.
highlight all those sections
It's-
that we're unsure about.
Yeah, and I think it's great to get a legal opinion, but I don't think it's biased because if you look
And maybe it
on,
isn't.
you know, if you look on St. Anthony Street, St. Anthony Street, like where Home Hardware
Right,
is and liquor
yeah.
store. They have separate parking lots. They're not parked on side of the street. They,
Yes,
True.
they have their sidewalk
But-
that gets plowed, but there's not even a sidewalk in front of Home Hardware.
but
There's not, like, so
there's
they
a
go
side,
in
there's a
and.
sidewalk
plow.
in front of Foodland,
There
there's a
is.
sidewalk
And
in
that
front of
gets
the liquor
cleaned,
store.
right? That all
But
gets cleaned.
Why are those property owners clearing that sidewalk? Cause in your section. you
They're
have-
not,
They
they're
clean their parking lots, but they don't do the sidewalk.
they're doing their sidewalks, but Ken doesn't go in and do
I don't do their parking.
their parking lots, is
No,
what
no,
I'm
no,
saying.
but this is the thing, like,
It's
it's
totally
it's
different.
pedestrian. So you go down St. Anthony Street, the
Mhm.
town is clearing all the way down through on the sidewalk,
Mhm.
right? So it goes in front of the Independent, it goes to the front of Foodland, it goes in all the way along there. They go down through the core, they're doing the sidewalk, but the bylaw's sitting there saying that every property owner on there that's in that commercial section has to clear the sidewalk.
But then in the policy, it says that,
It defines the area where that's the case.
but it says that we're doing it for them as a,
Courtesy.
Courtesy.
I believe the exact word was just courtesy.
The public works is doing it for
Yeah.
that section.
yeah.
So the rest of the town, they're doing it because that's part of the policy.
So you're thinking it should state it
It's all our sidewalk.
Yeah.
Five-
It's
5
town-
feet or whatever, they will take care of 5 feet across.
They'll do the strip, and like he's
All
doing it,
sidewalks.
and remove the access, like he does in all.
Okay,
all
that makes
sidewalks in town.
sense.
Yeah, I think if it is determined that it should change and we should take ownership of a portion, I could certainly provide notes about how I feel it could work operationally, that we could be very specific.
Mhm.
And not create a situation where budget is spin out of control because we're doing a lot more.
Well, the
Right.
courtesy is only in the sections in front of the commercial
No,
building.
no, I understand that, but I'm saying, like I said, we could define it as an accessible pathway, beginning of the curve for a distance of X, you
All
know,
sidewalks.
to be done, you know, a certain time, certain frequency, or when it's deemed to be unsafe, you know, things like that.
I think if we're
Which is
getting,
essentially how we handle all the other sidewalks.
Yeah.
I think if we're getting a legal opinion, the question is our liability going to change? Currently, this is what our bylaw states, but we are plowing. We're suggesting possibly that we're going to eliminate the obligation on the owners. Does this mean that we're taking on additional liability? Or do we already have liability because we're doing it as a courtesy?
Mm, It's kind of, yeah, it's good to
Which I
get.
suspect we do, but Experts.
Well, it's funny,
Yes.
because you drive by the lighthouse, and it's not a courtesy, it's our responsibility. And then you drive by in front of the Amanda's restaurant next door, and that's a courtesy, because we're down plowing in front of a commercial building, and then you go through the lot, at the Irving lot for the parking, and it's our responsibility again.
Yeah, no, it's gotta be
Right, so that
more,
courtesy thing should be removed, and it just should be, this is our exposure. We're responsible for this. We're gonna do a path. This is the method we're gonna do it. Individual stores that are open should be obligated to clear their path to their own stores. That's not something that I think Public Works need to be clearing steps and all that sort of stuff and icing that or salting that.
it would be nice.
Unworkable.
Yeah.
Well, exactly.
But if you wanted to.
We're just trying to make the sidewalk accessible.
Yeah, yeah, just that, everywhere, yeah.
Of course.
So do we want a legal opinion on, like what Paul says, is our legal exposure for right now, our liability exposure is this? Is it changing if we make a change? Is that what we're looking for?
Yeah, we like to review what we have currently from the two policies.
Mhm.
Is there a problem with those? And what if we did this, what would be the impact?
Yeah.
I agree.
Alright.
We can highlight it so that we can
Mhm.
save them time,
Mhm.
highlight the sections that we're unsure about.
Yeah, I can do that. Perfect.
Okay. I guess that's what we'll refer to that too, and then,
So in the meantime, you'll just keep
As I've done, yeah.
clearing.
And
Thank you.
as I said, I have received, the team has received far more thank yous than
Yeah.
people raising concerns, and both are
Yes.
welcome. If you
Yeah,
have a concern, call me, my number's there. But it's been easily double thank yous.
that's
That's
nice to
great,
hear.
nice.
what question
And a cake.
before you go, Ken?
You got a cake? Did you?
Do
Nice.
you guys ever salt without plowing, like just,
Oh, all the time.
so you salt just,
Yeah, but
It's just-
it's just because, even like this morning, even though obviously we weren't done plowing, it was just very, very slick because things had frozen again
Right,
overnight
yes.
and the streets were damp.
so
So
you're
it warmed up, yeah, so we will absolutely,
salting?
and the
not
truth
necessarily
is,
plowing?
we probably more often just, especially with the weather changing a little bit,
Yeah.
more often we just salt and not plow.
Okay, well, I.
We always,
I
we
have a
always,
question on that.
I say almost, we almost always salt when we plow unless we're not getting down the bare pavement, but we will often salt without plowing.
Mhm.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Any other questions for Ken?
That.
Yeah,
All
stick
right.
around, Ken. Stick
Moving
around.
on then. To request for a decision, equipment replacement in January 2024. I was gonna come over and I was like, there's no way I'm
very
gonna
hard
do
not
this.
to take this personally, that when I arrange a party and no
So
one
what-
Well, it was a
shows up.
I'm
blizzard, it was a
sorry.
blizzard,
Yeah,
so.
The
you
best
know.
time.
I did not make it either.
I was in Cuba.
Perhaps the most hurtful excuse of.
I know. Yeah, sorry.
Do you want me to get the motion on the table?
Yes,
Okay, I recommend to council to approve the updated appendix B of the capital equipment replacement policy for fiscal year 2024-2025.
I'll second that.
Now,
Okay.
before we,
yeah, go ahead.
I know I can't, but.
I can't, but I will.
Yes. So if we wanna talk, I mean, cause I know there were some questions about how scores are achieved within the
Yes.
policy. And so, we work to the policy, but certainly the way the policy is structured, it doesn't capture everything. So if you'd like, and I don't have to do this part, I can speak to specific concerns about every piece of equipment that you like, you mentioned hours.
Yeah.
All right, so I mean, just broadly, I can say it's the difference between city miles and highway miles. If your car has 50,000 miles on it and they are all in a
Yeah.
pothole-filled city, that is different than 50,000 miles on the highway. We run these things full out at capacity. For the last 4 days, it's been 12-hour days.
Right, I just, before, when I looked at the hours.
Yeah.
These weren't residential usage of the equipment, these were being done by, contracting businesses that were saying, okay, this is heavy use, comparable usage.
Yeah.
And they were saying, 2,000-3,000 hours for this, and I looked up by the model
Yeah.
of the unit. And said, like, what's the usage, what's the lifespan of this? Well, it should be about 2,000 hours. That's heavy usage, and these things aren't anywhere near that on the.
Some of them, no, but I can give you the whole list of issues with them.
Right.
You know, and so I think for us, it always needs to be reliable, right? It's different when I go to my car and it doesn't start. It's frustrating, but there's things I can do, right? I can call the service. I can plug in the charger. I can do lots of things. When the plow doesn't start in the morning, I am not gonna get the same level of understanding from it because the streets aren't plowed, because we have one street plow. All right, the tractors, we've got a little bit of depth there, but that's gonna go away. And that's fine, but you know, it's one of those things where we need it to start the first time every time. And so that's why scores can change drastically, because you know, as they age, suddenly they are not reliable. The small tractor, which could have been traded in 2 years ago, has left me stranded 3 times this winter, you know, out in town, where I've had to call somebody and we've had to fix it on the side of the road to get back to the shed, you know, things like that. And so you want it to be reliable. The 1-ton truck yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before? It's hazy. But the salter broke. It must have been yesterday, because today we had to salt the streets with a tractor, because the streets had to be salted, period. And then, success story, we fabricated a part to fix it for less than $100. So that was really cool. But anyway.
Well done.
So yeah, we just need it, we need things to be reliable, so they age very quickly. You said, you know, it's a 1-ton truck that we've put a dump bed on and we load 3,000 kilos of salt into, and so we drive it very, very heavy, and then there's a plow on the front, right? These things just get lots and lots of wear, and they run, you know, when you're running a blower, you're running the engine at maximum revs, and then you're just going for hours and hours moving snow, and it's just, there's a list of things for all of them. So we just, and we could keep them longer, right? You know, I want to discuss trading in some things, but we could keep them longer. But like one of the tractors I'd like to trade in a year early, we could keep, but you know, I will spend literally $10,000 in this next year to make it go 1 more year. Or, you know, what I will speak to details in a moment, I can maximize my return value and trade in, and then just basically get a new warranted vehicle and not maintain some value, and that I don't have to spend on the maintenance of it, things like this. So we're always trying to strike a balance. But you know, they lead a hard life for us. They're small, they get lots of use, and we're just, yeah, I mean, like I said, I can just run down the list if needed, but you know, it's just, it's not all captured in the report card, but you know, the issues exist.
But we only have 3 vehicles that we're looking at replacing this year.
Calendar year, yes.
Yes.
So we have,
That's new year, that's
yeah,
gonna
we have an old tractor that we kind of just hung on to. We have a larger tractor, and I want to trade both against a new tractor. And then we have a 1/2-ton truck, which we've hung on to for 2 extra years, which I have thoughts on what to do about that, but I'm not ready to make a formal presentation on what I want to do with that.
But the 2012.
The 2012 was gonna go. And I can get, I guess I can speak to that, I can get $24,000 for that. The 2015.
For a trade-in, you mean?
Yeah,
That's
it's huge.
pretty
damn
good.
And then
And like I
for
said,
the
the
2015, I can trade that in now and get, I have already got 36,000. So, for example, so we have in our policy, the replacement cost of the 2015 tractor is defined at $60,000 as per the policy. The cost from Kubota quoted to replace that is $96,500. If I trade in now, I can get that tractor for $35,464 in cash plus the trade-in. So I
And you
mean,
gotta trade them both in.
I'm trading them both in, but then I get a new warranty tractor, all new implements, and actually I get a rotary brush, which I don't have, that works now. So I get a little more capacity by trading in now and not spending any of the maintenance on to keep these things going another year. So in my opinion, it's a cost savings ultimately. We're not spending as much as we thought we might have to spend, and certainly to buy it off the shelf new for cash. We're not spending anything like that.
Did you say both Kubotas or just the, what was the
Both.
two?
Yeah, I say supposed to, we're only, you know, our allotment is 1 tractor, and so both would go.
And a better one would come in.
Yeah, I'm getting good return on, and actually the one I'm getting is a tiny bit narrower as well, so it's gonna fit a little better, and so it won't be quite so fraught going through some places.
But we would no longer have this backup tractor.
We weren't meant to have the backup tractor.
And we
though.
wouldn't be able to, in the justification,
Yep.
it says, it also saves us an overtime. Because you can run both machines at the same time.
But that's a separate, I mean, if council were to decide that we should always have 2 tractors, we can spend that money. We were never meant to have 2, it just, we hung on to 1, and so that's why we have 2. Now, my thoughts of replacing the 1-ton are getting a side-by-side, which can accept the plow.
Not
and
the one
salter.
ton, the half ton.
I'm sorry, the half ton, yeah, you're right. The half ton would be trading, instead of, because right now we have 38,000 set aside for a new half ton, which is probably not.
Sorry,
enough for
how
a new
much?
half- 38.
38, okay.
And so it's probably not enough for a new half ton, but if we go with the side by side, I can spend it. Yeah, it might be cheaper, and then I can put a plow and the salter on that, and now I can do trail work and I've got a backup. And then, but I'm not really increasing my vehicle a lot because I'm only having 1 half-ton truck now, I'm not having 2. So I think, what I'm trying to do is, to the extent I
I like
can,
that idea.
minimize costs, and that's difficult, but just trying to be super efficient. And I don't know that we can afford, because we're a small unit, to have things that only do one thing. Right now, our
Yeah.
half-ton truck, it drives places and it can pick up garbage, right? But if I get the side-by-side, I can still
Yeah.
do that stuff, and then I can go
And
on the
you can
trails
move
and I can fix those. And in a pinch, I can plow and salt with it. The tractor, it's just, I think it's just maximizing value of our current tractors and not spending the maintenance money to keep them going 1 more year. So I'm just trying to save there, and just ultimately, I wanna, vehicle cost wise, I wanna be ahead, right? So just
Yeah.
money that can be put back in the bank.
So it sounds like you have a different proposal than what's contained in Appendix B, which we're voting on.
I don't have.
Well, it's this, it's.
Yeah, it's just the
it's
policy.
that.
Oh, yeah,
It's
okay, it's
just
the
that.
policy. Yeah, so it's different. I mean, what I wanna do is bound within the terms of the policy. We've scored these vehicles. They score high enough to either, not demand, but trade-in is appropriate if approved. So within the terms of the policy, what I'm asking to do, it's like in addition to just approving the
What's
policy.
the warranty on these units?
6 years. 6, I'm sorry.
So that might actually, that's not something we've been acknowledging in this replacement plan anyways. Like, the warranty vehicle, like you're saying, it's not gonna be the same with maintenance, because you're gonna be able to.
Yeah, for major, other than consumables, yeah, exactly, if there's a transmission issue, things like that, yeah, I've spent on the little tractor. It's got a bad transmission, I've had 2 service calls on it, each one $1,200.
Yeah.
To keep it driving, and that's the thing that left me stranded, because it's called a hydrostatic transmission, the foot pedal was bad, right? And so it wasn't resetting to 0, so I'd get out and it would stop, and then that's it wouldn't start again. It's just a little nightmare. So the running costs will drop with the new vehicle, because major mechanical is covered under warranty, absolutely, and then it just needs less, right? It just needs oil.
Sounds reasonable.
I think it
Good
does sound
explanations.
reasonable. What does our deputy,
Well, so this is for next year's budget, which starts April
Yeah.
1st.
right, yes.
But yeah, I would like immediate approval, because if
These deals.
they're available, the deal, if approved,
Yeah,
I can have the new piece here in a week and a half.
So you'd have to amend your budget right now, your budget that you're in right now. I'd have to get an audit opinion on that.
okay.
This is, you've only got 1 month left, but it's
a critical piece,
it
yeah.
needs it. Or you can see if,
But these are the
They
units that
would-
we were looking
they
at
would.
changing anyway, 2024.
Yeah, I think so.
These are the units we were gonna change anyways, according to the.
Yeah, I'm
According
only
to our
asking,
policy.
the little Kubota was already supposed to be gone. The big one, I'm asking to do it a year ahead, because I think the condition merits it. And then there's a deal to be made here to do them both now.
Right.
With the half ton, I'm not asking to do anything now. I think I have got more research to do, and then when I do want something, I'll present it fully fleshed, so you know exactly what's being asked of you.
And that would be with maybe getting rid of one of the half tons.
Yeah,
and
one of the
getting
half tons is due to
the
go,
side by
but
side.
maybe what I would like to
Maybe.
determine is maybe the best replacement isn't another half ton, maybe
Right.
it's something with a little more flexibility in it.
But that isn't on the table right now.
Correct.
Okay,
And
okay.
what about the police car?
that is to be replaced.
I don't think they need a police car. I think that money should be put to public works. I think we can do it. And I guarantee we'll make
Side by
everyone.
side instead.
And I
We use it
think-
as side by
I
side
think-
instead of you.
Yeah.
We'll let them use it on Tuesdays.
And I mean, he's been looking as well, so
Mhm.
he has a deal, he potentially can get two, but of course, that would be for April.
Yeah, that we don't really have to worry
No.
about tonight.
So right now, we have a request to get rid of 2 tractors and replace it by 1.
Correct.
So, we have a motion on the table right now,
Mhm.
which is kind of a.
Well,
We're not approving that anymore because we're making changes to it if we do the other one first.
but this appendix is for next year, and it's just tucking away 71,000 of the amount that you're going to send over to the capital reserve. You're just earmarking 71,000 of that is for this. So whether you send, so it's 10.25, no, it's 10,000 between the 2 Kubotas.
Mhm.
It's still, we would still put that away towards a new Kubota, and whatever's left over still stays in that pot for another Kubota 6 years or 10 years down the road. That's how it works.
So we're just putting if we approve this, we're just putting $71,000 aside. We're
Yeah.
not agreeing to the replacement of the police car, the 2011 Kubota and the half-ton 2012 half-ton.
Yes, you are,
Okay.
but for April 1st.
So do we not want them to approve this Appendix B at this point? Since for one thing, we're looking at potentially replacing 2 Kubotas and doing so this budget year. We're not even sure about the 2012 GMC.
That will go in the next fiscal. It needs to go.
2020.
Yeah, we're talking about
But
changes.
We may not want to replace it. We might want to do something different with it. Right now, we're agreeing that we're going to be purchasing another half-ton, which
As per
we
policy.
may not need.
We need something. It has to be a half-ton or some other tool that can do the half-ton jobs along with other jobs.
Right. Do we need to approve this now?
You don't need to approve it now, no. We've always approved it before budget so that they could get their cars, they could get deals and
Right.
get them lined up, get quotes. But they don't purchase anything until April 1st. Or until the budget's passed,
Well,
so,
except for this situation.
yes, the
So-
situation is unusual.
So we
Okay.
vote, we can
So we need
either
2 motions.
defer this. We can't really pass a motion on the Kubotas because we don't have the details other than $24,000
What do I need to
trade
do?
in, but we need to have something concrete to vote
I
on.
have a quote from the dealer. And trade-in value is confirmed.
And can we make a
You don't have to go to
separate?
tender for that.
And, but do we need an audit opinion?
Well, I'm going to get an audit opinion. I'm going to see, I mean, it is kind of like we are in a sort of, I won't call it emergency, but we're in a critical, it is critical.
That
Well,
we
it's
get
one of
these
the things where
Kubotas.
we get, there's a deal on the table that we take advantage of now, we get this deal. It's kind of like the Charger. Or not the Charger, the SUV that we got for the police department. That was a more of a out of the blue deal that we needed to take advantage of then.
So is this a separate motion or by making this,
Well, I
agreeing
think,
with this?
I think we rescind this, the motion that's on there now.
Yeah, we need to make a new motion.
And then make a motion about the Kubotas?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Cause this here to me doesn't seem like it gives him
Yeah,
direction.
we can change appendix D.
Right, to. I could be wrong, I don't know, just doesn't,
No, with appendix D, you're right, Holly, we just have to change to reflect the
yeah,
will of council.
so. Yeah,
So in 24-25, we won't be purchasing any Kubotas.
exactly, cause if we do it
We're gonna do it
now,
now, yeah.
so to me, yeah, it's 2 totally different things.
So if we do it now, where do we, it's coming out of the capital that we have in the reserve now.
Yes, it is.
And then we're not doing it for the next year.
That's right.
And then the questions that are coming up is the half-ton 2012, and assuming the 2018 charger.
Yes.
And, okay, well, I guess that's a Mark question, but I mean,
Yeah.
we got a 2018 vehicle with 50,000 kilometers on it.
Sounds pretty good. It's a backup.
It's- Yeah,
Yeah, that's a totally
that's
different.
not a lot of kilometers.
So we rescind this draft motion? And then is there a motion,
Well, you would,
like,
what
shouldn't
is,
we have
what is the,
numbers?
yeah, what is
or-
the total dollar value that you're going to get on the trade-in? And what is the total dollar value we're gonna expend?
Which way do you want it? Trade value first?
Sure.
Trade-in value is $61,036.
That's for both the
Correct. that's
2015
Together, you want it
and the-
individually?
No, that's
Okay.
fine. And then we're gonna have to spend,
The total cost of the vehicles is $96,499, so the spend is $35,463.
$35,460
Lost me.
plus tax.
Plus tax. And a portion of that comes back, but yes,
And that's delivered?
I would not myself.
So then your motion would be in this current fiscal
Fiscal
year,
year.
2023, 2024,
Yep,
to trade in the 2011 B3000 Kubota and the 2015 Kubota
You want the number on that one?
for a total of $61,036 and a spend of $96,499 for a net spend of $35,463 plus tax to come out of the general capital budget.
I'd make that motion.
I second it,
Okay.
And in addition, you need to amend your capital budget
yes,
to include this.
amend the capital budget to.
To reflect this,
to
to reflect this.
Reflect.
You can do the two motions in one.
Okay.
That change?
Yeah.
Further discussion on that motion then.
Kim, did you go all that?
Kim's on it.
Well, it's $100,000 worth of vehicles. Replacement value for the two Kubotas, which we were looking at replacing this year and next, this upcoming fiscal year and next fiscal year. So instead of $100,000 spend, it's 35 or 36 plus tax.
463 plus tax. is what I have.
463, it is, yes.
Yeah.
35, 463.
Yeah, 35,463.
That
Okay.
sounds,
That's good.
as long
I
as
think
we
it's a
are.
very strong deal, and for what we're getting, it's really good.
Good for you for looking out there and
Yeah,
getting a
nice
good
hustle.
deal.
So when you do get it, I'll need the serial number and everything,
Oh, yeah.
put insurance on it and you know all that stuff.
All right, question on the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. So,
So what do we do with the last motion? Previous,
I think
We
just
rescinded it.
we rescinded it?
Well, you can't rescind it.
You can't?
It well, it didn't go through. I don't,
No,
you didn't vote on it.
no, I just made the motion. It wasn't
But
even
nobody
seconded.
voted, so you don't need to do anything.
I don't know.
It done.
need to make a motion on this now with the change, or we're just gonna wait till we defer till?
I think I'll redo it, I'll just redo it.
Yeah.
She'll redo it. She'll
Okay,
do
so we'll
that.
bring it up at the next meeting then.
Okay,
Yeah, and you'll have a change to the appendix.
yeah, it'll come up in council.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Ken. Go get some rest. 5 o'clock comes
Tomorrow's
early.
a special treat, work starts at 8 AM.
Oh,
I'm freaking
lucky
out. I
man
don't know
you.
what I'm gonna do with myself.
And you can just relax all evening, that's great.
That's been lunchtime for the past week.
Annapolis Valley Regional Library draft letter.
It went out yesterday morning. I was asked to draft a letter. It's not really for the Annapolis Valley Regional Library, it's to the minister, who will be responsible for funding, provincial funding for regional libraries.
All right, Board of Police Commissioners.
Okay, so that's a reserve
Yes.
fund, so there was a question about that for, oh, well, first you have a draft motion for the Valley.
Oh, I
the
will,
library.
yeah, I'll
Yeah.
recommend to council to send the letter to Minister McMaster supporting the AVRLS request for starting the funding review process early.
That's not what I were saying, actually.
Okay,
You wanna make a motion?
Because it's not to start the process early. It's
okay,
just, that is just providing our insights for their consideration when they do it.
oh, so not really starting.
It's not,
it.
it's
It's
not
not-
to start early. It's-
So
For consideration.
just. What would, is there a motion needed
Yeah.
to
We're
send out a
submitting-
letter?
You already sent it?
You've already sent the letter,
I haven't said anything.
Oh,
I've
okay.
just given it.
okay, so.
Ah,
I was asked to draft a letter by Sandy. I
Did it,
yeah.
did.
and it's great, but,
Okay, so-
just to recommend to council to send the letter.
yeah,
To
right,
Minister
McMaster.
Next
period.
semester supporting,
You don't need the rest.
No.
yeah, okay, we're gonna leave it at that.
No subject?
You could say supporting AVRL's request.
Oh, yeah, but yeah, leave out the part first,
Yeah,
the starting the funding.
Supporting, recommend to council to send the letter to Minister McMaster. What are you recommending? Send a letter to Minister McMaster highlighting
In consideration of
Funding
AVRL's request.
deficiencies.
the need for support for financial support for regional libraries.
yeah, that's a good one.
Okay,
You have that? Do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Paul.
Oh, you can second. It's your letter.
Your turn.
No,
I like the way he worded expressing support for the,
Financial
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
support.
Question on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. Board of Police Commission Reserve Fund.
So I think it was asked, some of the money the police bring in,
Yes,
put it in reserve fund. You don't need to put it in reserve fund. When we do the budget, when we pass the budget in April or May, whenever it gets passed, the portion that's going over to capital reserve, you can earmark, then you can say like 30,000 of this is for the police department. That's all you need to do. And it'll go into an Excel spreadsheet, very similar to what the capital equipment replacement. We know exactly how much is for each piece of equipment, and that's what we'll do. We'll just put it in there. And as it's consumed, it decreases. As it's funded, it increases.
And it's done every year.
It can be done every year, or
Like a
you can
decision every
choose to
year.
do, yeah,
so we would just decide the amount?
yes.
is it an amount or, well, it was tied to their generation of,
Of course, so if they brought in 30,000, you could choose 30,000 or whatever,
So it would be earmarked for the police.
yes,
To.
capital equipment,
Yeah,
Yeah.
to capital equipment, and with that money, they wouldn't have to come to council every time.
no, they
They
still
could
have, no, they
they
still
have,
have,
they still
we have to
have to.
approve the spending of it.
Yeah.
But they know that if they're gonna, once they get new guns.
Mhm.
And he would be able to say, okay, in my capital reserve,
Mhm.
I have $32,000, I'm
Yeah.
gonna need to spend 12 on a new guns, then he can put that through.
Yeah, because we had reached out, I think the CAO reached out to other municipalities that had
yeah,
this sort of
she did
setup.
and so did I,
Yeah.
Yeah.
For people, for.
Yeah.
Police departments that do run training and
Yeah.
generate money. Okay,
So
So-
are we deciding at budget time whether we want to do this? Because we haven't made a decision yet.
you
Have
can
we?
decide at budget time, that would be
Okay.
something that's referred to budget.
Okay.
I think we meet next Wednesday, so we can,
I think it should be tied to their generation of sales and to allocate a certain portion of it, whether
Yeah.
it's 10% or 15 or 20. We make a decision of that and then it's allocated every year based on something, instead of, can we afford to give them 20 grand or 10 grand out of that? or we just absorb it. So I think it was,
Yeah.
hopefully the election generate something on a continual basis. I'm fine with it going to budget on that.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll bring something back from the commission, what they would like, I guess. Okay. Glyphosate,
Yes.
spray, draft letter,
There is,
tactics.
I'm not doing it this
Okay, I
time.
can make the motion. I move to recommend to council to send the updated letter of the executive director's sustainability and applied science on glyphosate spray.
I'll second.
So this is a scaled back version of the 3 drafts that came from the Environment Advisory Committee. Was it staff that put this together or?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I just got a little feedback from some of the members of the committee. They said it's fine, it covers the main points, but it's a much weaker letter because it doesn't have the research and references attached to it. So it's very scaled back, but they're fine.
We did send the Globe and Mail article that Paul had sent us,
Yes.
equating it with, it says dangerous as red meat. So that,
No, it didn't say.
No.
or not as dangerous, sorry, it would be the equivalent of banning red meat, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, that was way.
And that wasn't sent by me, that was sent by Stephen,
That
the
was-
committee. It came from the committee.
Oh, yes, and you'd asked for it to be distributed, that it- all the members got.
No, that was, Sandy sent it to all of us.
Yes, Sandy, but that
Okay.
didn't come from you.
No, I did not.
Okay,
I
No.
thought something.
No,
did.
and I was just curious, in
Yeah.
light of the article and
Yeah.
what the article states.
Yeah.
Does the committee still want this letter to go out?
yeah,
Because the article, of course, is not in support of the position being taken by the committee.
right.
Yeah.
So I thought that maybe the committee chairs had a change of heart after reading it.
Well, it's going, I think, Kim, you sent it out today to everybody on the committee, right? For consideration at the EAC meeting?
Well, the letter.
No,
no,
just the article.
I'm
The
sorry,
article.
the article.
But the article came from a committee member.
Yeah, so that's why I'm asking,
Right.
because the article is quite clear that, the author, who is Professor at Dalhousie, feels that Roundup is essential to modern agriculture, and that the issue is poor communication by the industry that has allowed special or industry, in his words, industry or special interest groups to sort of take advantage of misunderstandings,
Right.
lack of knowledge.
Yeah,
So if that was being circulated by the chair or the committee, I thought maybe
Yeah.
the chair has changed his
We're gonna-
mind.
I don't know, we're gonna meet, I sent him an email, but he didn't respond. We are meeting on Friday at 9:30 for a regular monthly Environment Advisory Committee. So I feel that we've gotten this far, we should perhaps hold off and have a discussion at the AC
Definitely.
meeting and see what the feeling is of the committee members before making the
send this
motion and
one.
sending this out. Just one last check. What does everybody think?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd much rather have it.
yeah,
we want to make sure.
Yes,
okay,
Perfect.
let's do that then.
okay.
So there was a motion, but it didn't go anywhere. We're just gonna leave it for now.
I guess tabling it.
Yes. That's the word I was looking for, table it. Thank you.
Correspondence. Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities 2024 membership dues. Any discussion?
How much do we pay them?
It doesn't say.
Is it optional?
This is our
Yes.
NSFM. membership?
Yeah, it's gone up 2%.
Yeah, we pay about $1,800.
I think one of the main benefits that I've seen, that I don't think the lobby effort is particularly strong at all. Anyway, but I could go on about that, but now they've got a database on grants, which is extremely useful because it cuts staff time in, considerably if we've got a heads up on stuff, so that is very, very useful to us, because we probably take advantage of grant opportunities more than most units.
Yes.
So that, I think, is a change they made this year that's worth it.
Mm.
Okay.
Cuts down on the time we have to spend chasing every bloody lead
Yeah. Good point.
anyway. But I agree, like, I don't see the lobby value, but I guess it's a good thing to belong to something too, bigger than ourselves.
$1,800 is a lot, but I guess if we get some return on the database would be reasonable.
I think we do, like, that alone, I would say that alone.
Go in while we're still a member, copy it.
It doesn't work like that, does
Oh,
it?
come on.
It's always annual.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, so we're gonna go to Nova Scotia Power Station Retirement NSURB update.
That's good to hear what they have to say at the upcoming meeting.
Yeah,
Yes.
26, I think.
Sounds like it may not be closing anytime soon.
Well, at least not this year.
Yeah.
Does anybody know what an ROV inspection is?
ROV.
Anyway, I can ask at the meeting.
Yeah, and I don't know what unsuccessful dewatering of the plant.
It's not good.
I don't understand what that means
There's water
really.
There's
in the
water
plant.
There's
coming in.
water and the
Yeah,
body will
Doesn't
get rid
sound
of
good,
it.
And the
whatever.
pumps
basement
had to
and
be
stuff.
replaced.
Yeah, I did get that, but I
It's like a big glitch.
think there's,
Goodness, okay.
Not good for
Things are
Nova
not going
Scotia
well.
Power,
Yeah.
good for Annapolis.
So do we ask them at that meeting about the blue building and the erosion that's going on by the gates? That's their
I
land,
think
right?
when Sandy had mentioned that would be a good place to bring that up.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
yeah, it's gonna be a good meeting.
I think when she was talking to Emily, that she may have raised it.
Yeah,
okay. Well, that'll be an interesting meeting for sure.
and who's responsible for the road itself? Is that the province? Because it's really undulating now.
I know.
For
it
6
doesn't.
Sink
inches,
every,
Yeah,
Yeah,
DOT,
Every
6
few
inches
years
only.
this happens.
Yeah,
no.
6 inches on the top.
So we've got the province responsible for the road. We've got Nova Scotia Power in charge, responsible for the power plant or decommissioning the building, and then we've got the gates.
which
And
is,
not just that, what's under the
Right.
asphalt.
And who's responsible for the gates? The Department of
Well,
Agriculture?
we think Department of Agriculture will be.
Right.
But we think, but remember the county and the town sent a letter asking
Right.
for, we want an assessment report.
Right.
We were told we'd get one.
Yeah,
Of course, we have not received one. So I'm thinking we should follow up on that letter and ask them, is it done yet?
right.
And is the province really responsible for the road? I thought there was a, I thought
6
there was,
inches on the top.
okay.
Last time we looked, that's part of Remo that came
The
out.
top 6
Okay.
inches?
yeah,
top 6
but it's
inches
the,
only.
it's below that. That's-
Yeah, because
it's
every few
very-
years they pave it and it's
Right.
good for a couple of years and then you bounce on
Our
it again.
concern is what's below.
Who's responsible for what's below the 6 inches?
That's the issue.
Right.
We don't know who's responsible
That
for
is
that.
correct. That's why
Built the
Remo sent the
causeway.
letter. Yeah. Down with the causeway. It could come down all by itself.
But those gates, they have to be kept in tip-top condition because that's protecting land on the other
Oh,
side.
yeah.
So I'm thinking we should
And that's
follow
part
up
of
on
our
the letter
sea
between the
level
county and the
rise
town. We should follow up on that correspondence. That's a loose end for
Oh,
us.
very loose, yeah.
So we should, I think we should resend it or something.
Hmm.
Okay, Annapolis Royal Fire Service Annual Emergency Call Report. 31 calls, 3 for the town and 28 for the county.
yeah, I just wanted, there was something that stuck in.
Tab 9.
Okay, total emergency. Okay, total numbers of building fire calls to the town was 3. But am I reading it wrong? It doesn't really say the county.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
28.
does.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
28.
non-building fire related.
Yeah, 31
Yeah.
calls.
Okay.
Yeah.
But only
Non-
9 non-building.
Yeah,
Only
okay,
9
okay.
building, So there could
Yeah.
be far more the
Yeah.
county.
Well, that's what it didn't read right for me, but anyway.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I must have read that like 4.
So all of the fires in Annapolis County that they're responding to are not listed here.
Yes, that's what I'm getting at. These are,
Well, These numbers don't have the 28 though, 3,
28,
No,
4.
3 is 31.
31.
They've done this.
Yeah,
in
no,
a
no, the
strange way.
breakdown of these ones below the 28,
Yeah,
I think are the non-building
Yeah,
ones. And then there must be it
the
doesn't add up.
28 then is buildings, fire buildings, fire.
Well, they're in the county. I think they just want you to know they're in, I thought it was just they wanted you to know what was in the county. what was in
28
the town.
fires, then 3 vehicles, 3 without entrapment, 4 responder calls.
10, 12.
It doesn't
So-
add up, so.
It just
there's-
doesn't make sense.
There was a
Maybe
total
it's
of
just-
31 calls. 3 calls were in Annapolis, 28 were in the county.
Okay.
These were the non-building ones, I think is what you see below, vehicles
yeah, I
without
think it's on,
entrapment.
yeah, it looks like it's on the wrong line, you're right.
Yeah, it's
So we
very
should get
confusing.
clarification from the department. It's great we're starting to get these
Oh,
reports
I love
again.
this. So,
I think we have to clarify.
yeah, so we had 3 fire-related calls. How many other calls did we get that wasn't fire-related in town?
Well, there was only 31 emergency calls. That's just in January.
But I don't know why they both don't say building,
It
building,
just
fire
doesn't-
related
I
town,
think
building,
they-
fire related
I think
county.
in fairness, they just
We
put
don't
it
have
on
brush
the wrong
fires, we don't
line.
have car
I do.
entrapments in town.
True,
I think they
true.
just put
But
it on
don't
the
the
wrong
firemen
line.
come for anything? Like
Because-
even when.
Yeah.
It's very similar to past reports, remember? They would always give
Fire
the total.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I think too.
So I think we go
But that
back and
wasn't
just
in there.
clarify.
Right.
Yeah. Like
What's
I-
impressive about this report is there was 30 firefighters in the Annapolis Royal
Yeah.
Fire Department, 30,
Yeah,
of which 5 were new last
Yeah.
year. They recruited
Yes,
5
they've got a big-
and they've had non-leave. Their retention,
So far,
Rate
we're
is so
February
high.
2024.
Yeah, but
no,
that's
it's
that's
good. It is
impressive.
good.
It is good.
It is
No,
good.
they
Really
worked
healthy.
hard.
so in February 24, there's gonna be a big lot that's retiring, is that what we're thinking? No?
No,
No,
not saying that.
Okay.
But it's just growing,
The
the
year is
volunteer
young.
basis.
The year is,
growing.
yeah, the year is.
Yeah.
I think we just
That's
go back
really
to them and ask for clarification. on
Compared
that.
to other fire departments, I mean, do they have 30
No.
fire?
This is
Well,
one of the
It's
biggest,
amazing.
this is one of the biggest and best.
Right, yeah.
And Chris
Incredible.
McNeil alluded to that too at the meeting, didn't he? Saying
Mhm.
that they're going to be checking out like the capacity of all their fire departments. Is that
Right.
some are doing really well
Hmm.
and some, of course, are not doing well.
Right.
But I think he was alluding to the fact that Annapolis Road is.
We're very fortunate.
We're very
Yes.
lucky, yeah.
Incredible.
It seems like a small number of emergency calls, listening to the fire whistle go off.
Yeah.
I would have said that it went off far more than 31 times. And the fact that there was no chimney fires and no brush fires.
But that would be in the county,
They were in the county.
Yeah, but.
but they,
I think we asked for
They're saying
clarification.
Yeah,
that
I'll ask
that
for
they have not
Yeah.
responded to any.
yeah,
And that seems
I'm sure they have, but
Low.
in the county.
very
yeah.
low.
Considering the amount of times I go by my house,
Mm,
and that's always going out to the county.
So clarification required.
yeah, I just would like to, I'd be, yeah, something that's just not quite. Like that. Okay.
Roundtable.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
You got mine, so there's, yeah, so I have nothing to add to my mayor's report. There you go, but I do have something on IMSA, no meeting held. I did include the twinning report because there's a lot of critical things happening there or that need to happen.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The only thing I left out of the twinning report was consideration of Annapolis County in terms of being perhaps a member, whatever group is formed, maybe having a seat. I forgot to insert that. That's something that could be considered.
Right.
And I forgot too, that it was mentioned to Chief Potter that she wanted to go with the delegation. There's a delegation going to France next year, so there's an opportunity to invite her. So those are two
Oh, yeah.
important things that
That's cool.
were not in here.
Yeah. That would be great.
Just one thing about it, suggestion, I guess, in light of what was said during the MEDAC meeting. And this focus on business and the economy.
Yeah.
Instead of reaching out to all the former members of the twinning committee, maybe it would be wise to reach out to the business community first, to see what kind of interest there is among the business community.
Well,
People who will
I
be
had a
benefiting.
conversation with a business in the county, just outside of town, and they are manufacturer. And I kind of discussed with them the idea behind what Medic was doing about the potential of putting a business group in with this group going over, and they were very keen. And because it was a new market they could go after, so, I think there's potential in that, and reaching out to the general area and see who, what interest is out there. I think that would be wise. I think we could see a lot of return from that. That's part of my story there. And the only other thing I wanted to bring up on my roundtable is the Public Works doing the job in the snow removal in the last storm. There was a lot of snow
Yeah.
that was not expected, and it kept blowing around. I was like, oh, the sidewalks up our way was well maintained, so we're down the list.
Yeah, you did a great job.
Yeah. Counselor.
Okay, just to remind everybody that it's the pool's big public meeting tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock at the Legion. Looking for as many people to come out as possible, sharing ideas, answering questions, and looking to recruit volunteers for small tasks, big tasks. So if you love the pool, if you've been to the pool, if you're involved in the pool in any way, shape or form, in the past or in the future, come to the meeting, 6 o'clock at the Legion tomorrow evening. See you there. That's all I have for roundtable. 6, get it into your calendars.
I
6
have it,
o'clock
I just don't know if I can.
in the
make it.
Legion tomorrow evening.
Yeah. No,
Already on my
it's-
calendar.
yeah, I
Excellent.
really, I
Although
really.
there is a
hope I
school
can.
dance at 6:30.
Oh.
Tight scheduling.
I don't really have anything for the roundtable other than same, like, yes, the pool and Public Works have done a great job. We have a new staff that started on Monday.
Yes.
He
we
kind of
started
walked
on
into
Monday
a
at 5
bit of a
a.m.
storm,
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah,
yeah,
so,
yeah. Hopefully this is it for our bad weather and go back to our, yeah.
Well, it was pretty light this year.
Yeah.
I know, I guess it's gonna be 10 degrees on Sunday,
So there you go.
Excellent.
double digits.
So.
We'll be golfing before we know it.
Yeah, it's all good.
I really